Now, here's the question. Last year, unwittingly, because we don't compare notes beforehand, unwittingly, our favorite album of the year was exactly the same thing. Will,
All right.
will it be the same thing in 20
I,
for 2022?
I don't know, man. I don't know. We're about to find out, though, I guess.
What
All
was
right.
your
So
number
my
one?
Discordant oppression, tyrannical shame.
Greetings, mates. Welcome to episode 163 of Into the Necrosphere. This week, I conclude my epic and momentous countdown of my favorite albums of 2022. I am joined, as is now tradition, for the final installment of this countdown by my brother, my fellow horseman of the podcast Apocalypse, and my good friend Mike Hill. He is the frontman for Tombs, the frontman for Scorpion Throne. He's also the host of the excellent weekly podcast Everything Went Black, and the co-host of one of my favorite weekly podcasts, Necromaniacs. He proffered his top 10 as well as counting down mine. We got an update on all of his musical endeavors, and for those of you that aren't MMA fans, I am going to apologize in advance because we probably spent a good 20 minutes of the opening part of the conversation talking about mixed martial arts, the latest happenings in the UFC, and various other things. So great catching up with him as always. You guys are absolutely going to love this episode, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on our selections. So if you are watching this on YouTube, drop me a note in the comments. Thank you very, very much to all of you that tuned in for the live stream last week as well, which doubled up as episode 162. Definitely gave me a couple of ideas as I was reflecting on how it went. One of those ideas was potentially to do a couple of news rants as a live stream at some point over the course of the next couple of months. And for those of you that never stay until the very end of the podcast, firstly, shame on you, shame potentially even on your families. But if you don't, make sure you do and find out what happens during the news rant section. Typically what I do is I go on Metal Storm, I check out some of the latest metal news headlines, give you my thoughts, my takes. We listen to some music, I give you my first impressions of what I'm hearing, and sometimes I mull some of the other issues of the day. This week, I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the third episode of the Last of Us HBO series. Many of you have been watching it. Many of you, like myself, have been enjoying it. There are some strong opinions either side of the aisle on this third episode, and I've got some thoughts I want to share as well. So stick around for that. Of course, if you are new to the podcast and you like what I do, please make sure that you elbow drop the subscribe button off the top rope on your platform of choice. Also, very importantly, make sure that you are following my fellow horseman of the podcast Apocalypse. Every Monday, Brandon Legion brings you Horrible 666. This podcast, of course, comes to you every Tuesday without fail. Every Wednesday, my friend Mike Hill, as I said, does Everything Went Black. He returns on a Thursday with Necromaniacs alongside his co-hosts Mike Scandado and Jeff Kashid. And then every Sunday, the Reverend Carl Haikara brings you the Horned Lord's message on the Lord's Day. And he and I are going to be doing an episode discussing one of my favorite horror movies ever, The Exorcist 3, and that's going to go up on his podcast probably in the next couple of weeks. We've not recorded it yet, but I'm very excited about doing it. I love talking about that movie, and I love catching up with Carl. So if you haven't checked out his podcast yet, make sure you do so. Make sure you show plenty of love to all of the horsemen. For now, though, all of the housekeeping announcements are out of the way, so strap yourselves in as I welcome back to Into the Necrosphere, Mike Hill. The bed head that you're currently sporting suggests obviously that you've taken the or made the effort to get up at the fucking crack of dawn to come on the podcast. So I very much appreciate that. But how have you been, man? How's the year going so far?
well, well, this is pretty much the time I normally get up, so that's pretty good. So
Yeah.
I didn't adjust my schedule too much to accommodate this, so that's good.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I'm just happy the year started. Holidays are kind of a drag sometimes, and things kind of slow down. Everyone goes away to do their thing with their families and all that. And now that we're well into January, things are starting to pick up and getting busy again, which is really good.
And have things been getting busier on the music front for you as well? Because I know, I mean, I know you've been working on some new Tomb stuff, and there's obviously Scorpion Throne going on in the background. What's happening there?
Well, we keep having these really great tour opportunities getting rescheduled to later in the year and now 2024. So that's been frustrating. I mean, we had stuff scheduled for November last year that got moved to the spring, and now it's happening in the fall. We had another tour offer come through that was supposed to be in June, and now it's like winter of 2024. And
Jesus.
yeah, so I mean, we're not promoting a record right now, so I guess it's not the worst thing. But I like to get out. I like to stay on the road and be busy out there. And so we're going to try to do maybe some regional stuff on that level. And I mean, as far as writing goes, we all four of us are actually collaborating, which is great. Typically writing has been a very sort of isolated, insular pursuit, that relies heavily on just, here's the songs, these are the demos, let's learn them. And people would add their parts, but actually we're kind of going old school this time around. Everyone has riffs. Like I have like complete songs written, but once we get down to the practice space, like other members would be like, "Oh, I have this riff. Let's try it out." And it's been great. It's almost like, it's like when you first start playing music and everyone's in the jam space and you're just trading ideas. It's actually come down to that again, which is really refreshing. Got some Scorpion Throne stuff in the works. And there's another project which is unnamed right now. That's I'm actually going to be recording 4 songs next weekend in a proper studio, which is kind of cool instead of the file sharing travails that is popular these days. And that's a little bit more in my mind, I wanted it to sound like like Typo Negative or something like that, but it actually sounds more like in the funeral doom kind of genre, I would say. And I'm sure that once it's mixed and the vocals are done and everything, it's going to sound even more different than that. So
yeah. I was about to say, I mean, I'm surprised you haven't yet gotten into doing something in the post-punk vein, or even in kind of the sort of Joy Division, goth, electronica kind of style, because I mean, I know how much you love that style of music. I really like it too when it's done well. And I'd certainly be very confident that you could do something pretty amazing. If you put your mind to it.
That's not to say I haven't tried. Let's put it that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, my thing with that is, I mean, I love even newer, stuff that falls into that, stuff like Lebanon, Hanover, and all this electronic music. Like I love all that kind of stuff, but I just don't want it to sound derivative. I want it to sound like, well, this is something that's unique, and it's not just a carbon copy of something that was really popular in the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing,
Yeah, and I can get that. And I think it's what you have the inspiration to be making, right? Not what you necessarily like. There's a lot. I mean, I enjoy I enjoy a bunch of different music. I think if I ever put my head to it, maybe I could write something reasonably confident in the black metal space. Would I be able to do like a Mark Lanigan song or a King Dude song, or I mean, anything like that? Very unlikely. Without, at least to me, it's sounding absolutely fucking terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, you want to primarily satisfy your own interests. You want to be satisfied with the output personally, and then what other people think of it's really cool. But like if you write something and you hate it, then you can't put it out. That's how my post-punk pursuits have been. It's like, I have demos and stuff that I've done, and I'm like, yeah, I can't show this to anyone. This is obviously like some rip off of like, Killing Joke or like Fields of the Nephilim or something like that.
Yeah. The tours that you mentioned, I won't let the cat out of the bag, obviously, but I assume the one that has been moved to the fall is with a band we are both exceedingly passionate about, and are super excited to hear about that potentially coming off. Am I thinking of the right one?
Yes, that's the one that's been moved. That'll be the third time that tour has been rescheduled. And but it's at least there's things going on in the background. And like I said, we're not in a record cycle. So this is all, nice things to do to stay busy, and are definitely excellent opportunities to have. But I guess we're also trying to record at the end of the year too. So that's for a 2024 release. And so there's stuff going on. It's mostly all background things and a lot of writing, a lot of lyrical like intention, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, getting back as well to what you mentioned Scorpion Throne earlier. I fucking loved those tracks that you put out on that first EP. And I definitely feel like, one, I'm very surprised. I know you elected to put it out on Bandcamp. I don't know whether you actually spoke to any labels about it. I'm very surprised there's not more labels that have kind of been all over it since. Or perhaps you're courting offers in the background. But I was super impressed with it. It was really, really, like really powerful. But what was cool about it was still extreme, but unique and distinct from Tombs.
Oh, thank you. It's I didn't, that was a very personal kind of release, you know what I mean? And it was I didn't even approach anyone about possibly releasing it. I didn't tell anyone at Season of Mist or anything, like, oh, here's my new thing. I didn't even tell Mark, the guy who manages us, like, that I did it. I just put it out one day, and with no fanfare. And people seem to like it. There is a cassette coming out actually, which the Andrew who played drums on it, who's also used to playing Tombs, one of his friends was putting out a cassette of that. And I think this guy has a bunch of other grind or releases or extreme music releases that he's done. And so that's cool. But like the newer material, I think I'm going to try to be a little bit more ambitious with that. The 4-song thing was it was more of almost like a therapeutic release of emotions that I've been dealing with over the subsequent the years prior to that coming out. So to me, it was like it's only going to ever be the cassette and on Bandcamp. I'm never going to have it on like Spotify or anything like that. So maybe I really would. If you're into it, cool. If you have it, great. But I'm not going to push it on anybody, really.
Yeah. I'll do the pushing on Into the Necrosphere. And then outside of music, you back in the gym, you kind of back at training and all of that shit as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been pretty much Monday through Friday. I'm at the gym a couple hours a week. Wednesdays is only 1 hour because I got practice later that night. And doing my thing, sparring, hitting pads, doing strength and conditioning, like just that's really the glue that holds everything together, man. Really. It's not like I'm, I have a championship aspirations or even competitive aspirations at this stage of my life, but just being able to go down there and train with everyone, see the guys every day, help people that actually are, competing, like being training with guys who actually have fights coming up is been great.
Have you guys got any? I think when we spoke a while back, you mentioned a couple of dudes that you had trained with that kind of made it to the UFC and stuff like that. Do you have any recognizable names that you're training with right now?
Not really, but there's a couple of guys, not so much on the MMA front, but we're more on the kickboxing, like Muay Thai front, that are really young dudes that are coming up, and guys who are crushing it. And actually a young lady, Sarah Leone, she's multiple regional champ Muay Thai. She's 18 years old, and she's just special, man. I think that she has, I know kickboxing is not very big in the States, you know what I mean? I don't know if she plans on doing anything with MMA, but I could see her in the next few years being in like, competing on the level of like one or something like that,
Yeah, yeah.
but she's killing everybody. And, she's traveling now. She's going to Thailand in a couple of months with, I will not be attending the trip to Thailand this year, but, the rest of the team's going. And
I was thinking about this earlier, actually. Like one thing that I would love to do if I ever had the time off and the money, like if I were independently wealthy, I think I would probably do this maybe even once a year. But I would love to go to AKA in Thailand because one, it looks fucking incredible. Two, obviously you're training with elite of the elite guys there.
yeah.
It just looks absolutely awesome. And I was wondering to myself, like, have you considered doing something like that, taking like 3 months sabbatical and going to study under the masters?
Always. Oh, every year I think about it, and it's like, I mean, I just from training over the years, I do have a lot of connections in Thailand just through the people I train with here in the States. But it's like, it's always, but I mean, I'm on usually, besides from those 2 years of the lockdown, I was gone like on tour like all the time. You know what I mean? So it's like, trying to do those two, and that's ultimately why I never really pursued competitive, like really went for it competitively when it came to that kind of stuff. Is like, music is always my passion. You know what I mean? It's like music is always my first calling in life. And all right, guys, I'm taking off to Thailand for 3 months or whatever, and like, yeah, we had to turn down
12-week fight camp. I'll see you in a bit.
Yeah, I couldn't really. I would love to, maybe a month, 4 weeks or something like that is in the cards, but yeah, I just can't swing it right now. I have to be around.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing for me. I definitely with work and stuff, I could never get 3 months off. But I would love. I mean, even if it's just 2 weeks, I would love the experience of going there, and at the very least being able to say that I was there. I hit the pads. I held the pads for a couple of dudes. I've mentioned this story on the podcast too. Like the levels when you do Thai boxing, as I'm sure you know, there's certain people where when you train with them, you just know there's something different about them.
Absolutely.
The most eye-opening experience for me was Ash Grimshaw, who used to fight in Bellator, and he fought for Cage Rage in the UK as well, and I think Cage Warriors too. He only fought at 145, so he's quite a bit smaller than what I am. But I remember holding the pads for him one night, and he says to me right before he's about to kick, he's like, "This is going to hurt," and I'm like, "Oh fuck it, man, it's not going to be nothing. I've held pads for heavyweights, and it's been fine." I swear to God, if he had taken a run from 20 meters back and swung a baseball bat straight into the pads, it would have hurt less than what he did when he threw a kick. It was like every single kick he threw, I was just praying, like, can this shit be fucking over?
Oh yeah. I have a similar experience. This Mohammed Lemjardine, who he fought in Glory. He's like a pretty well known European kickboxer. He was like the guy who ran the gym that I trained at for a while, and he and he's my boy. I love that dude, and we do a lot of like just like one-on-one training and whatnot, and holding pads for that guy, and he's literally only 145 pounds, man. It's the same deal. It's like getting hit with a Mack truck, man. That guy, like, leg kicks, like we do a lot of like drills too, like contact drills, and even though he's only going like 60%, it was like, damn, there's like the placement. It's with the drilling, it wasn't so much like the power, but it was the placement. Like, leg kicks, like you can tell he hit you at exactly the right spot on your IT band where you can feel it, like on the side of your leg and everything. And also that, every now and then a guy would show up at the gym, I'm sure you've seen this, like that had to be kind of put in his place, you know what I mean? So guys, some 185ers, 200-pound dudes, like just barely touching their liver, man. These guys would just crumble, man. It was just crazy.
Yeah. But you mentioned about the kickboxing. I mean, there's some people that have made fantastic transitions into the world of MMA. I mean, obviously there's the Reem. My favorite fighter at the moment, Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, I know a couple of folks are predicting that maybe this is the last year of her dominance. I mean,
I don't
everybody's
see
run
it.
comes to an end, but yeah, she's just on a different level. And then Alex Pereira did the unthinkable, and he sent Izzy's head, straight into row 5. So, I mean, imagine holding pads for that beast.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
I mean, everything he does just looks like there's injurious intent behind it.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, I've been watching his fights for years, man. Like, because he had a prolific career in glory,
Yeah.
kickboxing. And then the thing that really got me was I was watching his fight, Glover Teixeira's fight over the weekend, and Alex was there, coaching him and then warming him up. And there's a video of him warming him up backstage, and Alex is huge compared to Glover, and Glover's a big man. Alex is probably about 230 pounds. It's crazy. Yeah, he's huge, towers over him.
Yeah. Fight I'm most excited about this year, I have to say, UFC 285, Jones's debut at heavyweight. I mean, I kind of have to, when it comes to John Jones in particular, I have to separate the man from the fighter, but I do believe, regardless of what anybody thinks of the guy and regardless of the myriad stupid things he's done in his life, there is an artistry to what he does. I'm very curious to see whether that translates to heavyweight, because his opponent is no joke, but I mean, he has always operated on a totally different level. Curious to see what 4 years away does to that level, but time will tell.
I mean, it's like a whole that I'm interested in too. I mean, John Jones is one of my favorite fighters, actually.
Yeah. Same.
The thing I'm interested about is like the transition. Like, I mean, with the extra weight and cardio, and I know that taking a long time off, but I mean, you know yourself, probably like pre-fight camp movement, and then like when you're lighter, and the way you move and everything, and just the way you feel on your feet, if you didn't have to cut that weight, like it's different. You know what I mean? Like, I imagine John's probably going to come in at maybe 240 pounds, and with no weight cut, and when he was 205, he was probably like maybe 220 or so. I would say 225 walking around.
Yeah,
so,
he would walk around at, I think, between 220 and 230, they would say.
Yeah, and so just that extra weight and how you are like on your feet and your movement and your your timing and all that stuff with that, just that's a factor, and that's what I'm interested in, and he's definitely going to be faster than a lot of those guys, and but also Gagne is, I think, he moves like a cat, that guy.
He's a nightmare. Yeah, I was about to say, he's an absolute fucking nightmare. Interesting for me, I think, the Henry Cejudo factor, because I like the way Henry Cejudo analyzes fights, like watching the videos that he's posted of himself training or training other people, but now also watching these clips that he's putting up of the work he's doing with John. I think the stuff that he does, the way that he analyzes an opponent and things like that. I mean, a dude who previously seemed completely and utterly unstoppable in Demetrius Johnson, I mean, Cejudo utterly annihilated him. I think that guy's fight IQ is slightly underrated, because people kind of look against the Triple C character, which is kind of goofy and but wrestling heel-esque, intentionally so, I think. But I mean, the guy has a fight acumen that I think vastly supersedes a great many people in the sport.
I like Henry Cejudo, and he's obviously a different person than Triple C. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you listen to him actually talk like intelligently about fighting and technique and all that sort of stuff, he's I like him, because like I've been following him prior to the Triple C. You know what I mean? Like, and you would hear interviews with him, and he's very thoughtful and very informed on his opinions, with technique and just the fight game and all that. So, but then when he puts on the mantle, it's a little bit unbearable, you know what I mean? But he is, he's probably a great coach, him and Captain America's,
Well, the thing is, it's like, I don't begrudge him doing the Triple C thing, because Chael Sonnen set the tone for this. Actually prior to that, several boxers set the tone for it. You're going to make more money by getting people, to be willing to pay to see you get fucked up. And especially if you're good, it makes the payoff even better at the end of it. And ultimately, I think again, then we'll stop going down this rabbit hole in a second for people that are going, why is this a best of 2022 and you've been doing 20 minutes of King MMA talk? But I have wanted to talk to somebody about this. But you look at like the comments and stuff on some of the some of the blog posts and the social media posts and the forums and things like that in the wake of, for example, the Francis Ngannou departure out of the UFC. And I truly just think a lot of fight fans, they just don't understand how business works. If the pie is a certain size, you're going to get a bigger size of the pie or a smaller size of the pie. And if you are someone like Demetrius Johnson, who was only, I think his best pay-per-view only did about 230,000 buys, you're not going to get Conor McGregor money. His best pay-per-view is over 2 million buys. So I don't care if Demetrius Johnson is a better fighter than McGregor. You're not being paid on merit. You're being paid on revenue generated. And that's kind of the scenario that Francis Ngannou was in. His highest pay-per-view was 500,000 buys. And that is off in terms of like records in the UFC by 1.5 million. So I mean, they actually, in my view, when it comes to business, I think they offered him a reasonably quite a generous contract, all things considered. And again, as I said, I just don't think people get it. So therefore, they don't get when somebody like Henry Cejudo does what he does. For me, I think if that's what you want to do to get eyeballs on you, do it. There's very few guys actually that's been able to get eyeballs on them without kind of going that step further. GSP is one of them, which is awesome. But I mean, some of the best fighters, Valentina Shevchenko is another great example. She's not a draw. As much as I think that, I feel like sometimes when I watch her, I'm like, I feel genuinely privileged to be living at a time when I'm going to be able to tell, hopefully, my daughter or any other kids I have down the road, I was around to see Valentina Shevchenko in her prime. But it's just, when it comes to money, there's not, she's not making X money, so she's not going to be getting, the bigger paychecks.
Yeah, that's very true, man. I mean, I guess I'm used to looking at things just even from like a music standpoint, where there's like tons of bands that I think are like incredible and should be playing in front of tens of thousands of people, but there's a lot of bands that they just exist in this obscure like atmosphere because your basic construction worker guy isn't really going to get into like what they're doing, and other bands become massive because they just have like an appeal to certain people and there's a certain thing about them that resonates, and that's just the way of the world, and it's unfortunate, but in my world, Valentina Shevchenko would be a billionaire,
Yeah, agree.
And and the same thing with Demetrius Johnson. Like he would have been, I think he's like he's the ultimate technician, that guy, and I love watching his fights, but that's not what your average, casual. They just want to see these gigantic jacked dudes like slugging it out in the center of the ring,
beating each other to a pulp. Well, I mean, they also want to see, at least by the fact that the UFC are putting it on, they want to see the Power Slap League, which I think is there are various markers that indicate you're at the end of the empire or at the end of the age. One of them is Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. The other is the Power Slap League.
Oh man. I thought it was a joke at first, man.
Me too.
I was like, yeah, because I know they do that somewhere out in Eastern Europe. There's some like thing like that, and I'm like, wow, that looks like ridiculous to me. And then I found out that Dana White has his own promotion now of just guys slapping each other in the face,
taking turns to slap each other. Yeah,
and I mean, ironically, that was the same week that his own video Power Slap League came out and it was smacking his wife.
I was about to say when he decided he was going to participate in the sport. I mean, I've said before, I've met him. I spent 10 minutes talking to him, and when I met him, it was back in 2008, 2009. He was a really nice guy. The guy I met, I thought was a really stand-up dude, and even at the time, I mean, the UFC was starting to get quite significantly bigger than they were back in the old days when I started following them. But he was a very nice guy. I mean, the incident that happened on New Year's is very unfortunate. Well, my view is I think he did the right thing by just leaning into it completely and taking responsibility. But I do think also the world as a whole seemed to never be satisfied with somebody putting their hands up and apologizing. You know, like you see Pantera just got booted off of Rock Am Ring over an incident that happened in January 2016.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's
Really?
like,
Okay.
you know, so that to me is it. So what was Phil Anselmo supposed to do? Hang himself in a show of contrition? The guy apologized. I think if you think about the Dime Bash incident, I think Phil Anselmo has form for being incredibly socially awkward, and that social awkwardness very often translates to him saying things that I think he deeply regrets later. But I don't think that, you know, in our day and age, even back in 2016, but certainly beyond that, coming out as a full-blown white supremacist is probably the quickest way to disintegrate whatever social capital you have and ruin your career. And the only people who would do that, especially when they, you know, have a prolific career already, are, I mean, they're interminably stupid. I don't necessarily think Phil is a brain surgeon, but I also don't think he's that far down the intelligence spectrum that he's that dumb. So from my perspective, if you know, if he's apologized, nothing like that has happened since. I mean, to in 2023 say, you know, there's no room for Pantera in Germany, I think that's beating a dead horse a little bit.
Well, you know, the Germans go real hard generally in that, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of German people listening to this, so you guys probably know what I'm talking about. It's like,
yeah,
the Germans are very sensitive about that stuff. I mean, you know, for obvious reasons, you know, World War II, you know,
yeah.
but the that is a real big issue in that particular part of Europe. You know, I mean, there are certain things symbols you can't show, and they're very, very particular about that kind of stuff too, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, that Nazi salute probably didn't fly too well with
No,
you know.
definitely not. All right, so that's a beautiful segue. Actually, the better segue would have been when we were talking about obscure bands earlier, because I suspect both of our top tens are going to be laden with them. So how we're going to do it is we're finally down to my top 10. We'll do one. We'll go one for one, and we will start with your countdown. So what do you have at number 10, Mike Hill?
Number 10, I have Reeking Aara, Blood and Bone Meal on Profound Lore. And I've been a fan of, well, the band actually, I've only been listening to them maybe for the last like 6 months or so, you know, within the last half a year. But individually of the members of that band, I've been a fan of all the stuff they've done. Primarily Ryan, you know, was in Unearthly Trance, Serpentine Path. I mean, the list goes on. Villains, another very obscure band that I think only have cassette tapes out and maybe a couple LPs. And
which is the mark of trueness. But anyway, so.
Actually, the guy who sang, this dude Lino, that was the singer in that band, is probably one of the most cult dudes I've ever met. So obscure that no one knows who he is outside of like 5 people.
Yeah.
But you know, and of course, Will Smith, former vocalist of Artificial Brain, and one of the best frontmen in extreme music in the tri-state area, in my opinion. And that record and their EP prior to that, which I just started listening to, have been on heavy rotation in the latter half of 2022. So that's my number 10.
Will is such a character as well. I mean, it was great having him on the podcast. And even though Blood and Bone Bill did not make it onto my final top 30, they're certainly an honorable mention for me. And they were on the short list. It just so happened that there was so much stuff that came out this year. In any ordinary year, they would easily be a top 10 band. And I mean, for me, that Blood and Bone Meal record being their proper full-length debut, it's stunning what they were able to do there. I'm very excited to hear what they do down the road as well. But
just a couple of words about 2022, man. My runner-up list would probably be a top 10 in any other year besides 2022. So,
yeah,
you know.
Well, again, I mean, like I said, I've mentioned this many times on the podcast. This is why I've done a top 30 this year, because 2022 was just so completely and utterly off the fucking scale as far as just good stuff coming out. It felt like I couldn't just narrow it down to a top 10, you know. So I've had this 3-part celebration culminating at this one of what happened in the last 12 months. But yeah, Reeking Aara, great choice. My number 10. Verberus, Adumbration of the Veiled Logos, which came out on June the 17th. It was put out by, I believe, Norma Evangelium Diaboli. Not a band that I was familiar with, but when I heard they featured somebody from Ulcerate, which is, probably one of my favorite bands, I immediately had to check it out. And sweet Unholy Satan, I was not disappointed. I mean, if you like Ulcerate, if you like that kind of really dark, discordant, atmospheric vibe that they create, imagine that with more of a black metal varnish, over the songs. I think Adumbration of the Veiled Logos is it's a really challenging listen. Very long songs. I mean, the shortest song is 6.5 minutes. The longest is just over 20. But in terms of a absorbing end-to-end listening experience, it is obscenely intense. It really kind of pulls you in, and it's on a par, I would say, with Ulcerate, which is a massive compliment.
Yeah, that's a great album, man. Actually, I think either by direct recommendation or listening to the show, I discovered that. And I actually am a huge Ulcerate fan. We did a East Coast run with those guys a number of years ago, and incredible live band too. Definitely a great band.
Yeah, I've never seen them play, and obviously they were out on tour with the Werewolves guys. And Mayhem now, and I think Matt sent me a message about it and said, they've kind of been doing a lot of shows, and they describe them as being match fit. He says they're pretty incredible live. But I mean, that last album of theirs, again, one of the greatest album titles ever: "Stare into Death and Be Still."
Oh yeah.
But Jesus Christ, it was good, so fucking brilliant. But yeah, this to me is verging on being on a par with that album. By the way, just before we go to number 9, I meant to bring this up earlier. So you're talking about touring and stuff like that. Now, here's my question. Why are you and the rest of the Tombs gang not packing your suitcases and coming to Europe? And specifically, you should be coming to Europe, and we'll have a chat with Gary over at Reaper Fest. Ralph and Ultha are going to be there. How great would it be if Tombs is there at the same time?
Ralph mentioned something about that. And there was a conflict initially with, at first there was no conflict. Then there was a conflict, and now due to rescheduling, there's no conflict. So Tombs has not got an offer to play that, you know what I mean? So, but Ralph is like, oh, I was out in Germany, back in, a couple months ago for Unholy Passion Festival. And, he's like, you should come out, and hang out. I'm like, yeah, maybe I will now. It's since I don't have anything going on really at that time of year, I might as well. Now that I'm a civilian tourist going to Europe, which that was literally the first time I'd ever been to Europe without a bunch of road cases and like 3 other dudes with me. So it was a nice experience to just get on the plane with my rucksack and leave, and I have to worry about going to the oversized luggage to collect my guitars and effects pedals and all that bullshit. So yeah, because I don't know if you knew this or not, but I actually came out and I sang on Holy Passion.
I know, I saw that, which reminded me again of what we spoke about was with the Tombs sings Samhain, which that has to come out at some point. But because that cover was fucking awesome. It sounded so cool.
Thank you.
But yeah, man, I'm going to finally get to meet Ralph face to face as well at Reaper Fest. So if you can make it out for then, that'll be awesome.
Well, I'm talking to Ralph tomorrow morning, so now that I have some schedule changes, that might be a possibility. Ralph's one of my best friends, man. So any opportunity to see him and hang out, and also an opportunity to see you would be great too.
Yeah, no, that'll be awesome. All right, so on to your number 9.
All right. My number 9 is Null by Ken Mood. And I know that you're also a fan of these guys.
Big fan.
Yeah. And once again, I've been following, Jesse and Shane, specifically them, because they're the founding members, since they were kids, literally. You know what I mean? Like my old band and Ken Mood played a show in a basement somewhere up in upstate New York. And that's how I met those guys. And we've been friends ever since then. And, pretty much through the whole duration of their existence, I've been a fan. And every record gets better. And I think Null is like, you know, probably the pinnacle of the culmination of all the records prior to it, you know, and let's also acknowledge Scott Hamilton, you know, another great, he's been in the band forever, but he's like, you know, he's like, it's like the sick of it all thing, you know what I mean? Where like, you know, the bass player's been in the band for like 30 years, but he's still the new guy, you know, that's how I see,
Yeah.
kind of how I see Scott, you know what I mean? But he's been in the band forever at this point. And just a powerful album, you know, and I got a chance to see them live when they played, the East Coast run of their tour. I actually went down to Philly to see them, and crushing, incredible, just cathartic, you know, intense band, you know.
Yeah, Jesse is very, like, when you meet him, one of the things I've enjoyed most about talking to him, he really is, his music really is an extension of his personality. He's a I think he comes across as somewhat laid back, but he's not.
Oh
You
yeah.
get to when you kind of tap the right buttons when you're talking to him, it comes out. But I'm with you. I've been a fan of Ken Mode, you know, really sort of forever. I think the record that really turned me onto that band in a major way, and it was probably the right time for the point that I was at in my life. So, you know, which maybe tells a story all of its own. But Entrench was the record that I really liked. When that album came out, it was like, then I was all in on Ken Mode. And they've done so, I mean, the thing that I like about them, and it comes out on this album again as well, there's a spine to what Ken Mode does that stays reasonably consistent. I mean, it's basically anger and rage. It's like I said to someone once, if you take a, you know, grown man having a full-blown temper tantrum and put that onto a record, that's more or less what Ken Mode sounds like. But then the thing about it is they innovate within that really, really well. And because they're able to navigate that construct as well as they do, they're able to tease out a lot of different emotions and actually tap into a lot of different sources of rage. You know, Success is a great example. If you know, doing a fucking white collar job, it's that record speaks to me in ways sometimes that I don't think anyone who's not been in those shoes would understand. And then, you know, conversely, Loved, I think was fantastic in some of the themes that it touches on, especially, you know, you've been through a shitty toxic relationship. You know, it definitely kind of dips into that. Null kind of does, you know, Plume's similar subject matter. But yeah, they're a band who are consistently great. I've you know, I wouldn't call Jesse a friend, but I've spoken to him a couple of times, and I have the utmost respect for him as a guy. He's one of the people that, as soon as I had recorded the episode, I was immediately psyched, because I knew it was like, this is going to be good. You know, you get that feeling when you're having the conversation that you know, this is something that people are going to respond to, and they did. But yeah, totally with you. Ken Mode, top notch band.
Yeah, he's a great dude. The funny thing is, last year when we were on tour, we played in Winnipeg, and so I'm like, we drove all over. We had an overnight drive to get there, so we showed up, and I'm taking pictures, and then Morgan, our buddy, our mutual friend Morgan, who he plays in tons of different bands, and he's like, so when are you hanging out with Jesse? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're in Winnipeg, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm in Winnipeg. So I texted Jesse, and I was like, hey, I'm in your town, man. So it was just funny. So I know. It's like I was gonna see you later. Yeah. So guy had an opportunity to hang out with him twice last year, so that was great.
No, that's awesome. All right, moving on to my number 9, Strigoi, Viscera. Released by your own label, Season of Mist. Actually, this year, the highest ranking Season of Mist release on my top 10, or on my top 30, I should say. I mean, I don't think anyone will be surprised by the inclusion of this band. I am unashamedly a Gregor McIntosh disciple. I don't personally think this guy has really set a foot wrong in his entire career, which is saying something. I mean, he's been going since, you know, the late 80s. I think Lost Paradise came out in 1990 or 1991. Lost Paradise being obviously Paradise Lost. He has done a phenomenal job with Paradise Lost. To me, that band, even on their weaker records, is still great. Then he did Valenfire, which was, you know, next level, and some of the most brutal, incredible death metal ever. And then he's moved on to Strigoi, and he continues to do a fantastic job with them. I think that the new Strigoi record is definitely a big step up from Abandon All Faith, which came out in 2019. I think that record to me sounded like it was still, there was somewhat of a hangover of Alan Fire on that album, and I felt like on that record maybe some of the ideas that didn't make it onto a Alan Fire record found its way onto Abandon All Faith. This is kind of feels like a truly fresh start. But what I think Gregor does extremely well, and that he must never ever get away from, is he has a knack for writing a melody and basing melody on a very simple idea, and he's done this throughout his career. Paradise Lost, Val and Fire, everything like this. He's not kind of shied away from that on this album. So you listen to a song like Byzantine Tragedy, and it's unbelievably catchy, even though it's almost oppressively brutal and heavy at the same time. And that's kind of what makes this band work so well. And then the other thing is, if I had to think, if you 20 years ago asked me for a Mount Rushmore of death metal vocalists, it would be super easy. Glenn Benton, David Vincent, probably John Tardy, and, on and on the list goes. Probably, again, predictable answers. But fuck me, I never thought that Greg had it in him to do the sort of death metal vocals that he does, because it's almost perfect. It's almost too perfect. You think to yourself, how have you been sleeping on this voice for the last 20, 25 years of your career? Perfect enunciation, but so fucking brutal and so just hellish the way he delivers it. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, Strigoi is sick. I really, that record's killer. It did not make my top 10, but like I said, man, the runner-ups could be a top 10 of any other year,
Yeah, no, fantastic record. All right, on to your number 8.
My number 8 is Panzerfaust, Sons of Perdition, Chapter 3, The Astral Drain.
Uh-huh.
And listen, it's such an ambitious work, and I really do believe Panzerfaust has their own very unique sound, and you can hear the different strains of influences that sort of culminate in what they're doing. For me, I might be completely off base, but I hear not just black metal, but I hear influences like Swans and that sort of I don't call it industrial, but that kind of epic dreariness, that makes its way into their music. And then also just their own sort of flavor to it, Neurosis, I can see maybe that being an influence on them. And those are all the big boxes that gets checked when I listen to their music. And then also just all three of these pieces together makes a whole. And it's clear to me that a lot of intention went into the music, and that's the kind of stuff that I really appreciate. And then aside from all that, it's just sick to listen to. You put it on, and it's just an incredible experience.
I completely agree. They've definitely got an elevated, or have taken an elevated approach to black metal, or at least kind of blackened death metal, in my view. Because I don't know whether you got it as well. I don't think they've even ever explicitly said it. But the themes for the records for me, I mentioned this when I reviewed the record on the podcast too. First album, or the first installment of the Sons of Perdition trilogy, feels like you're in the thick of battle. The fucking mortars are firing, the artillery is going nuts, the planes are dropping bombs. The second part is kind of the aftermath of all of that. And the second part is, whereas the first record is really angry and really aggressive, the second record is far more kind of reserved. Even though the heaviness is still there, there's kind of an emotional element that gets kind of injected into it, and almost kind of a cinematic quality to it. That first track on the second installment, for example, it's so beautiful. If you hear it in the right context and on the right equipment and stuff like that, it genuinely brings a lump to my throat hearing that, especially that part where the woman is singing at the end.
Yeah.
And then this third record, initially, so Brock messaged me, and he said, I'm going to send you a link to the album so you can hear it after he and I had spoken. And that was a couple of months before the album came out. And I think the thing that I took away from it that was my immediate reaction, and as subsequent listens have reaffirmed this is kind of where the both sides of the conflict are taking stock, and it's almost like the sort of break like the break that happened between the first and the Second World War. The tensions begin to mount again, and I think it's not often that I'll kind of really pay a lot of attention to a band's lyrics, but I thought the final 4 lines on the record were unbelievably poignant. So it's on the song Tabula Rasa. It says, like shallow prey for the jackals, this is the final chance to utter the final sin. In the flood or by the fire, none will be the wiser. It's like such a eloquently written, almost really sort of poetic. But it seems to kind of leave that record on a cliffhanger, which makes me even more excited about, the fourth and final installment in the quadrilogy. But, I guess in a very long-winded way, saying the album is fucking brilliant. I think Panzerfaust are incredible. I also think that they would make a great touring partner for you guys. I mean, Tomb's
oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, they're fucking nuts.
Yeah, especially since they're in North America, and
yeah,
like the troubles we've been running into is coordinating stuff with bands from Europe, and a lot of it is probably my government's fault, for visa issue, things like that, because that's been what we've been plagued with. That there've been several European bands that their tours were, Watain and they were in Mayhem, like that was it just ended up being mayhem over here because Watain's visas, there's issues. So why now? Like they've been over here many times. But yeah, I'd love to. That would be incredible. I've been a huge fan of theirs for the last several years. And,
Brock is a good dude as well. I mean, I've never spoken to the other guys in the band, but Brock's a fucking great guy. Always a very controversial figure when I have him on the podcast. But I have never spoken to him and thought, I'm dealing with some crazy extremist. He's very considered in all of his opinions. He's extremely well read, and I think I just think he's a very kind of common sense kind of dude. And again, the great thing about it is it's reflected in their music. So yeah, massive fan. It may turn up at some point on my list, but my number 8, I've got Absent in Body, Plague God, put out by Relapse Records. I feel like a lot of people left this one off their lists because of the controversy that arose from Scott Kelly's very infamous, Facebook confessional. He obviously had said that, he had been abusive towards his wife, et cetera, et cetera. And I do feel like, I think you and I are aligned in the sense that we separate art from the artist. As much as there's a part of me that thinks, when you're abusive towards a woman or towards anyone, frankly, the Singapore cane is probably the way to course correct that behavior. But the reality of it is there's also 3 other men on the record, and it doesn't take away from the fact that it is a fucking incredible album. I mean, it's one of the most dark, brooding, tense experiences. It's completely unique. It feels like you're being sucked into a fucking tunnel. It's like you're walking on the Nostromo after the xenomorph has killed everything.
Oh yeah, okay.
And you're contemplating your life right before it's your turn to die. It is fucking astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And again, everything about it, what I love about it so much is that everything from the record, the album cover, through to the way the every instrument is delivered, through to the production, everything about it sounds unique. And as I said, I think it's a shame that it's been, in my view, maybe a little overshadowed by the whole Scott Kelly palaver, which I do hope also doesn't overshadow the work that Neurosis have done, because that's one of my favorite bands. It's also a band that from a sentimental perspective mean an awful lot to me. And just because one guy in the band is a scumbag, it doesn't mean that the work that all the other people put into it, should suddenly be negated.
Yeah, I mean, I had a spot for them, but they got usurped by some of these other records that came out later in the year, and they're on my runner-up list for sure. I mean, it's an incredible album, and I mean, hey, the fact of the matter, Dana White just smacked his wife on video. And and he still is like the CEO.
Still has his job.
He still has a job. So you can only you have to contextualize all this stuff too. I mean, I'm not being an apologist for whatever happened with Scott and his family. And and I know Scott personally, and I wouldn't say that we're close, like, like I am with some people, but I don't want to have any opinions about it because I don't know the whole story about what went on with him. But with that said, yeah, there's other members of the band that put energy into this thing, and likewise with Neurosis, it's it's they're like an iconic band with a huge legacy that he was a part of, and you have to acknowledge that. You know what I mean? It's you can't just, oh yeah, we're Neurosis doesn't exist, absent in body never happened. Like, you have to take the art for what it is and place it within the context of everything else.
Well, I would also, again, point out the hypocrisy of writing off a record like this, coming from the same people that have absolutely no qualms with, still talking about Black Sabbath as, rightfully so, as, the best band ever, or the origin of metal. They'll, those same magazines, websites, they'll praise and talk about Motley Crue. They'll feature Ministry, all guys, all bands who at least have, at some point, their various members, I mean, Ozzy Osbourne being one, various members have been embroiled in incredibly sketchy, incredibly by their vernacular, problematic behavior. So at what point do people get a pass on this? And at what point do we decide that we're now going to erase them from existence?
That's a great point, man. That's a great point, because somehow Motley Crue has been unscathed,
totally,
in all of this controversy.
Yeah.
And The Dirt, like that book, it's the biography or whatever that came out. That was like a book that was in the van forever. We all read it, and it was like the Vince Neil entries were like some of the darkest, most like nauseating parts of the book that made me just, like, the other stuff was funny, but his entries to me were like, I'm like, this guy's got some like, sociopathic, like, behaviors, you know what I mean? And somehow that guy, like, no one cares,
No.
And I'm not saying you should go after him, but it's like you have to apply the same basic principles.
Well, I mean, when Ozzy was high, he tried to murder what's her name, Sharon.
Sharon, yeah.
It's a very storied it's a very storied incident. So, again, like, I'm not saying that one is okay because the other is accepted. I'm saying none of it's acceptable, but I'm saying at the same time, you can't be trying to erase one thing from existence, but then the other thing is absolutely fine. What you can do is you either I think it's either or. Either you separate art from the artist, and you go, I don't agree with Varg, but I'm certainly never going to stop listening to Burzum. Or you go, okay, all of that is bad, and I'm going to remove it from my music rotation forever.
Yeah, it's like you have to just apply intelligence, you know what I mean, and look at things being different. I mean, even in literature, like Norman Mailer, I mean, that guy, apparently, by all accounts, he was kind of a scumbag too, yet he's a celebrated author.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back through the generations, really. I mean, it's musicians, artists, writers. There's a lot of them that have done incredibly distasteful things, and by our standards, have cancelable offenses in their register, and it's kind of just seen as a symptom of the time. So, anyway, okay, let's move on to your number 7.
My number 7 is Bluthaus Nord, Disharmonium Undreamable Abysses. And I've always been a big fan of theirs. I think the first Bluthaus Nord record that I heard was The Work Which Transforms God.
Mm-hmm.
And that, at that time, it was like a very different take on black metal, with the programmed drums and everything. And, and I've been a big fan of that type of stuff. So like when, electronic music, so when the two things met, I was all in, and then just the evilness of their sound. And, you know what I mean? Just like, they were like one of the most evil sounding bands, and because it had this like electronic vibe to it, it's sort of, the band just seemed to me like this abstraction that existed in some alternate reality that was like not part of this physical plane because of this I don't imagine them playing live, and that bands that don't play live to me seem like they exist in like the ether somewhere, and this band seems to come from like this other black dimension, somewhere from the abyss, and they came out, and this is where this music came from, I have a very active imagination, as you can tell. So,
well, I mean, I know you're a big H.P. Lovecraft fan as well.
Yeah, well, I was
going to get to the direct H.P. Lovecraft connection, which they really kind of seem to dial the volume up substantially on this record. But I loved it as well. I mean, on my list, it landed, for those that didn't check out that episode, it landed at number 23. It was actually much, much higher up, but there was in the critical listening phase of my calibration, there were a couple that sort of usurped that album. But yeah, I think fantastic and so dense in atmosphere. I'd say the only thing that I had wished, and this was my only one criticism of the record, is I'd kind of wished the vocals could have been a more prominent vocal on some of those songs. But that's a very minor complaint in the grand scheme of things.
But that's been a consistent thing on all their albums, really.
Yeah, that is true.
So buried and obscure and just like drenched in reverb, and I kind of wish I could hear them more.
Yeah, no, I agree. So folks that I believe you are familiar with, at number 7, Avaturn, the Ailing Facade.
Yeah.
I was so ridiculously, and still am, so blown away by this album. It is, when it starts, with kind of, it does one of my favorite things, which is I love kind of like an echo building up a voice, like the reverse echo, I think you would call it. It sort of has this crazy riff that starts, and then there's this reverse echo for the vocals. It kicks in. I can't remember what Nathan called the vocals. He described it as something fucking, but he actually had the absolutely perfect description for it. I think it was like, John Tardy gurgling on glass or something like that. But I mean, this whole album from start to finish is a fucking masterpiece. I mean, it's brutal. It's unbelievably catchy and memorable. It's very unique. And these industrial elements that they bring into it, these really kind of discordant, elements that they apply to the riffs, I think really add something, very, very different and very unique to it, because a lot of bands do that, but they don't do it the way that these guys do. And I think everything, again, this is another record where the album cover sort of sets the tone for what's to come. This figure peering into this very dark and sinister looking room. I think it's a masterpiece. I really do. And again, debut record. I know these guys have been, have been around for a while, so it's not like they're, like they're young bloods. But Jesus Christ, I mean, I was just absolutely blown away by how good this was.
Yeah. I mean, I know all the members in this band really well. I mean, Garrett used to play guitar in Tombs. He was on a Savage Gold record, and a very, very talented musician. And, we spent a lot of time together, obviously, being on the road together and in the studio. And at the time he was in the band, he lived in Massachusetts, so he would stay at my place when he came into town for rehearsal. So I know exactly where he's coming from musically. And this record is very much a culmination of all the things that he's into, and I'm really happy that he finally this thing's out, and because they have been toiling for a while, practicing. They put out a single a few years ago, and now that they're on a great label too, and I think a lot of people are discovering them, and I wish them success, man. This is incredible stuff.
Yeah, I reached out to them as well to try and get somebody from the band on the podcast, but sadly to no avail. I think I even had an exchange with the Profound Lore PR folks, and they were like, they don't want to do any interviews, anything like that. So which is fair enough.
You're a mysterious guy, very mysterious guy. Gary.
Yeah, which is actually not a bad thing. But all right, so what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Drudka, All Belong to the Night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, everything about Roman Senenko's output, Hate Forest, Windswept, all that sort of stuff is, it's been a fan, for a long time. And when I knew, obviously Season of Mist, I knew well in advance this record was coming out. And this is just, it's so catchy. and that's the main thing that draws me in with Drutke is how melodic their music is. But
Mm.
there's this darkness that just pervades all of it, and yeah, like in the opening track, the nocturnal one, like when the vocals kick in, it's just so like it just gives you like I got like this like shiver, you know what I mean? And yeah, I'm just big fan. This rated very highly. It's still pretty heavy rotation around here too.
Yeah, I think the melodic piece that you point out there, I think is really, I think it's something that really needs to be called out about that band, because there's a lot of bands that are melodic and the melody actually detracts from the intensity, whereas with them across all of their records, that's never been the case. The melody actually almost sort of helps further that along. And I agree with you. I think it's a fantastic record. I had a little bit of a gripe with the bass drum production on the album. But I could imagine the circumstances under which this was recorded, because as far as I know, I might be totally wrong, but they're also based in the Ukraine. So I don't know how they, how they recorded it, but I can imagine they didn't necessarily have, the pick of where they went and did this.
Sure. Yeah, and also their guitar tone is very unique too. I mean, it's almost like this clean, like single coil pickup kind of thing. It's not like, this heavy, like overdriven guitar sound. And for them, it just works like great, and I think, and obviously it was an intentional thing because Hate Forest has a completely different guitar tone,
Yeah. And the Hate Forest record was also absolutely awesome. And
Yes.
one of the main reasons I was very happy that I waited for the end of the year before I put out this list. Okay, so my number 6 we've already spoken about, Panzerfaust, The Sons of Perdition, Chapter 3, The Astral Drain. So let's move on to your number 5.
My number 5 is Guerilla. I guess that's how you pronounce it.
Guerilla, yeah.
Yeah. That record came out of left field for me, honestly. And it just really, it crept up on me and blew me away, because I think I'd gotten a link for it from Katie, like right around the time the release came out, or a little bit before. And I didn't listen to it for a while. Then there was the episode that you did with one of the members, and then I was like, oh, wait, let me check this out more. And I was like, when I finally got around to listening to it, it's like all I listened to. Like it was like my drive to the gym, I had it on. Then where I left off, it was my drive back home, and then I listened to it while I was in the shower after the gym, and then like it just became like ingrained in my like listening for like, I would say a solid month after I started checking it out. And yeah, I mean they're touring, I think, with Rotting Christ here in the States. So I'm gonna make sure I go out and check them out.
They are one of those bands where, and again, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, they're one of those bands where you just get the sense that there's big things ahead for them when you talk to them. There's like an intensity and a drive like that I got from the conversation that I recorded for the show. That and apparently that I've never seen them live, but my understanding is that translates very very directly to the way that they are on stage. I feel like they're the kind of band who can swoop in and eat Behemoth's lunch,
Oh yeah,
probably within the next album cycle. I agree with you. Mirage, phenomenal record, and I love the way that it was written as well. I mean, it was kind of written in a very spontaneous way. They purposefully kind of went away from being too calculated in the way that they pulled the record together, and they did something that was just kind of this sort of emotive vent, that was in the aftermath of the kind of worst of the pandemic. But I love talking to the guy. I've, again, another thing that I've ranted about in the weekly news rant. I mean, this sobbing and sniveling about the fact that maybe one of the band members used to be in like a new metal type band. I don't give a flying fuck. He could have been the fucking live bassist for Cardi B, for all I care. If you make music like that and you've done other stuff along the way, I don't give a shit. I just think they're a great band, and like I said, dude I spoke to, I thought was a fucking badass guy, and I love their whole vibe as well. I think the aesthetic of the band is awesome. It's something new, it's something interesting, and it's proof that I think, again, the genre keeps pushing forward and keeps coming up with new ideas and new stuff that's interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I could care less of what band the guy played in prior to this. It doesn't factor. I mean, I know plenty of people who care about shit like that, but I'm not one of them. and I think this is an incredible album.
I've never understood that. To me, again, I I've never been somebody who feels like I need to be part of any kind of community. So maybe because I've felt like that, because I've always been more independent as and I never had like a circle of friends. I've always had a lot of friends, but I've never had a friendship circle. I think probably the Horseman is the closest I've come to a friendship circle in my entire life.
Yeah.
But it's like in the sense that I kind of have to almost consciously avoid the comments on MMA forums in order to be able to enjoy MMA without feeling a sense of rage. I do have to avoid much of the metal commentary outside of kind of the Necrosphere bubble, because there are so many fucking idiots, sadly, that listen to this music and they make such a big deal about such bullshit. Things like, one of the Kardashians wearing a metal t-shirt, or, what band this person played in. I don't give two shits. I'm not, my life is not so pitiful and small that I have to hinge my entire self-identity to a band or a style of music or a scene or a community or anything like that. I'm my own person. And if somebody wears if the fucking Prime Minister of the UK wears an Antichrist Imperium shirt, I'll laugh about it and I'll move on with my life. I'm not going to go, well, that's it, I'm never listening to that band again.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
All right, so my number 5, the old masters of death metal, in my opinion, Immolation, The Age of No Light. Wow is probably the best way to summarize this album. I've been an Immolation fan pretty much since the very beginning. Previously, I thought the high watermark for the band, in my view, was Kingdom of Conspiracy, which made it extra special that when I had Ross on the on the podcast, he had his story that he told me about All That Awaits Us, which is one of my favorite Immolation songs. This album to me is just Immolation firing on every cylinder and probably adding a couple along the way. It's all the best stuff about them rolled up into one. Crazy technical drums, insane riffs, Ross sounding like an absolute fucking beast, and just songs that are beautifully self-contained in that you can get a sense of separation between each one. Like, the like some of the early classics that we've all been into, like Rain in Blood, or like, Master of Puppets, you could point out each individual song. And then death metal went through this period where it just felt like one colossal onslaught from start to finish, and there was never anything particularly memorable about it. Acts of God has that old school mentality where it's about everything is done in service to the song, and for that reason, again, I think the record is as big of a success as it is. But it is mind-blowing that these guys have been active as long as they've been. And people can talk about the new Obituary being great. I thought it was all right, but I thought it was reasonably mediocre. I mean, I think it's kind of on a par with anything Deicide puts out or anything Morbid Angel puts out. Of all of the old guard from the early 90s, death metal wave, there isn't a single band that, like, of that old that old guard, that on their best day is able to lace Immolation's boots. They can't sniff Immolation's jock, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think there's a band that comes close.
Well, I mean, I might be a little biased just being a New Yorker, even though I live out in Jersey, I still rep New York City. Immolation are like one of the kings of death metal. You know what I mean? Them, they are legends around here, and that this record shows up on my list too. I just want to give you a little foreshadowing on that. But they're I saw that they played a show here last year, and it was almost like a 90s, like something from the 90s. It was great. It was like Immolation, Mortician, Demolition Hammer played, Black Anvil. It was like going to like this old school like 90s like death metal show, and it was like one of the most incredible nights, especially coming out of like, it was early in 2022, so it was like people were just getting used to going out again, really. And they're the kings, man. And that's all I really have to say about them. And this latest record, bands with this long of a career, maybe you want to hear the hits from like the earlier records, but this new one, is like them really reasserting themselves, and I think in that position of dominance within the scene,
I agree, and it's a record where they legitimately sound hungry, which again blows my mind. You're talking about guys in their early to mid 50s to still have that degree of passion and that degree of intensity about what they do. It takes some doing. Equally, again, one of the few bands that not really ever done. They've never turned out a complete stinker. There's been records that maybe haven't been as good as the previous one or as the previous two. I know some folks had an issue with Harnessing Ruin. I didn't. I like that album very much as well. But they've never in their entire career put out an album that you go, well, that sucks. Or even that's mediocre. That's a 5 out of 10. And there's not really any other bands. I mean, maybe with the exception of Napalm Death, who else can say that in the death metal scene? And I mean, Napalm Death is technically death metal ancillary. So, but yeah, phenomenal. Okay, number 4 on your list.
Number 4 on my list is Watain, The Agony and Ecstasy of Watain. And I look forward to every one of their albums. I've always been a huge fan. I know that this record turned you around a little bit on that.
It has. I was about to say one of the big surprises of 2022.
Yeah. One of the things I always loved about the last few Watain records is their how am I going to say this, man? It's like there's these little, and this is more just on the songwriting end, where it's like it crams so many riffs into like one song now, but it doesn't ever sound like riff salad. Like there's a lot of times like you go down to the practice space and you hear other bands rehearsing their songs, and there's like a million different parts like smushed together, and none of it makes any sense. But with Watain, they're like their songs are almost linear in a lot of ways, where sometimes they don't like objectively go back to like certain things, but they'll put in these little pieces here and there. And it makes it very musical, and in a style of music that oftentimes is so extreme that it loses some musicality sometimes, but there's that element to it. But then there's also like this very rock and roll like element to it that's like almost harkens to like like a mid-period like Entombed kind of vibe,
Yeah.
Where they're into black metal, but you also suspect that they might be into like Guns N' Roses too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But totally like evil, and
Yeah.
that's what I love about Watain. And they're a standout band, I think, in that scene, in the higher like profile bands that they really do have a very distinct sound. I don't think anyone really sounds like them.
Well, I as an aside, before I talk about that record, Guns N' Roses have made a roaring comeback into my regular rotation. In particular, Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, because they did that remaster of it, and that kind of got me back into it. I'll never stop loving that band. I mean, Axl can be can sound like a child molester when he's on stage. His voice isn't what it used to be. But Jesus, man, I like those like when they were good, when they're on form, fucking hell, there were few bands like them. But yeah, like I said, Watain, big surprises of 2022. Them and Dog Funeral. Actually, I didn't really like Dog Funeral much before either, and I thought that last Dog Funeral record was very good. This Watain album, I think you can definitely tell why they're as popular as they are. Because one of the things that they've been able to do extremely successfully, and again, it's a real art form to doing this, is they've incorporated a very extreme side of the musical spectrum into something that I think if you were to introduce somebody to black metal, it's something that they could still find reasonably palatable. They'd be a good gateway band for somebody to get into the some of the harsher stuff. I mean, you're not going to give somebody the first Burzum record or the second Burzum record and go, all right, this is what you should be into from now on. That takes some getting used to. But Watain, I think, have done it, but they've done it in a way that doesn't feel contrived. I know we differ on this topic, but Cradle of Filth for me, that feels contrived. It feels like the weak man's game. Whereas Watain, is masculine and badass.
Yeah, totally. It's only after meeting Danny that I have kind of like come around more to Cradle of Filth. I mean, it's funny when you meet someone, you realize they're a pretty cool person. You're like, oh yeah, that's. I'm not trying to weasel out of what I said about that, but that's a component to that opinion.
Yeah, and I get that. Now, speaking of something that's not the weak man's game, at my number 4, Mystirming, Mayo Homri. I posted when I was out sunning myself in the motherland. I posted a video when at the beach, saying Happy New Year to everybody, and I spoke about the countdown, blah blah blah. I had my list already done. Everything was finished, and I think it was Carl Hikara that posted a comment and said, you need to remember, because I'd mentioned Hate Forest. He's like, you need to remember Mystirming as well. I hadn't even realized that it came out. Immediately got hold of it, and I literally spent from that moment forward, I don't think I listened to anything else for a good 2-3 weeks. And initially, it cracked the top 20, then it cracked the top. It cracked the top 30, then it cracked the top 20, and it just kept going up. It is such a fucking masterful record. The more I listen to it, the more I just become totally obsessed with it. Like every single thing that I love about black metal is wrapped up in this album. There's that kind of mean, military stomp in some of the riffs, track 4, which I played on the show not too long ago. And I think I'm gonna apologize to anyone from Iceland who I offend with my butchery of your language. But Engin Vorkun, I think is the song name. Hard as fucking nails. But every part of the record is just genius. It's a diverse album, but it's got this strand of malevolence that never slows down, from beginning to end. And such, because I subsequently also checked out the previous record again, and I do remember hearing that album when it came out, but never being quite as blown away by it as I've been about this. But this album to me is something truly special. And if people have not listened to it yet, they most certainly need to change that again. If anything proves why you wait until the end of the year to do a best of list, this is a great example of that.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I like the idea of doing it in the beginning of the following year because so much great stuff came out at the end of the year.
Yeah. Did you listen to that Mystirming album?
I only ran it once, but I got to revisit it. You know what I mean? It was great. I just haven't spent a lot of time with it, though.
I will make a prediction. I will get a message from you at some point over the coming weeks, and you will say, Jesus Christ, Jackie, that is the fucking bee's knees. All right, number 3 on your list.
My number 3 is Ultha, All That Has Never Been True. And that's that record's a work of art, man. It's a masterpiece.
Agree.
It's to think that they almost did not make this record is incredible. And I'm glad that they managed to, one last ride, which apparently turned out not to be their last ride, and just having some insights into the band. I'm glad this record was made. It has a very cinematic quality to it. And and once again, it's a unique record in a scene, in a style of music that is orthodox in a lot of ways. It's clearly black metal, but you can tell there's other myriads of different influences coming into the music. And like I said, it's hard not to have my friendship with Ralph color my opinion about it, but objectively, this is my number 3 record of the year. It's something I listen to all the time. Sharing the stage with those guys briefly, getting to know them personally last year. I never really met any of the other guys in the band until I went out to Germany that weekend. And, just being in the practice space of those guys was really cool. The festival, seeing them live, it was just all the expectations I had of what they would be live were pretty much answered that night, and it's a great record. I look forward to more, and hopefully get them over to the States at some point too.
Yeah. I absolutely love the cinematic quality about this record. I've always thought to myself, because I'm a big fan of film scores, and when Ralph was on the podcast,
Sure.
We spoke about that quite a bit. I love film scores, and I've always thought to myself that's that's unmined territory for a lot of bands. It's there's so many great ideas to be not necessarily stolen, but just incorporated as an influence. And some have tried, but for the most part, I don't think anyone has ever come close to doing it as brilliantly as what they've done. The way that they've deployed that influence on this record, it shows a true mastery of your craft. and it shows true mastery as a songwriter. And I absolutely agree with you. I think this record is flawless. The one thing that I absolutely loved as well about speaking to Ralph, I mean, aside from the fact that he's a very cool dude, and I certainly consider him a friend. I can't wait to meet him in person in July. But what I loved was confirming my suspicion that the third track on the record, "Bathed in Lightning, Bathed in Heat," was a reference to the track Suspirium by Tom York that was written for the Suspiria remake soundtrack, which I mean, that is a song I'm completely and utterly upset. Like, that's a song that I will demand gets played at my funeral one day. But the line on there, "Bathed in lightness, bathed in heat," I like the fact that he sort of had the connection to that. But yeah, I mean, the album, it's at times intense, it's at times incredibly atmospheric, and it's very unique. There's not really a band that brought out a record that sounds anything like this, over the course of 2022, or frankly at any point before then.
Yeah, and you definitely will be blown away when you see them at that show, man, coming up this year. Great live band too.
All right, at my number 3, Werewolves from the Cave to the Grave, came out on Prosthetic Records. Full disclosure, I had this record for about a year before it came out. And as far as death metal is concerned, I, for a long time, pre Werewolves, I for a long time bemoaned the lack of like genuine danger and genuine aggression that grabs you by the guts and makes you feel like I felt when I heard Cause of Death or the first Deicide record, or Blessed Are the Sick for the first time. And Werewolves brought that back with their first album. They turned the volume up on the second album, and then on the third album, they turned the volume up even more. And I think the three men in that band, Dave Haley, Matt Wilcox, Sam Bean, are elite level players. When they put their hand to pretty much anything. But when it comes to this band, which is kind of started as a throwaway project and just something that they were fucking around doing, it's insane what they do as an afterthought, essentially. Again, album is just absolutely beastly. The songs in your Harvest of the Skulls, pure genius. Watch Your Mouth, the song that ends the record, absolute genius. One of the best song titles I've ever heard, Crushing Heaven's Mandate. Absolute genius.
That's a good one, man.
Yeah, but and again, these dudes they've been around for a while, but they're just in top form at the moment. I've spoke about David Haley 2 episodes ago when I was talking about the Psychroptic record that he was on as well. I mean, that guy is just hands down, maybe one of the best drummers in extreme music right now. Matt is a riff beast, and Sam is, he's right up there with Greg McIntosh, with the elite of the elite as far as death metal vocals are concerned.
This record is in my mentions. It was on the top 10, but other stuff came out, and it's like it's been a hell of a year, man. So it's hard to really nail this down. But yeah, this is actually the first time that there's no Australian bands in my top 10.
Oh, really? I'm about to say that's a shame on you for discriminating against Australia.
You mentioned Ruins, actually. I think in the last episode. That's another great Dave Haley band that I'm also forward to hopefully hearing another record by them.
I'm gonna keep nagging him every time I have a chance to speak to him until they do that, because it's fucking genius. All right, at number 2, what's your pick?
That's number 2 is Immolation, Acts of God. That
all right.
Yeah, that's my entry, and it's hard not to have recency bias, but I remember when that record came out being totally blown away, and I'm like, I have to make sure that this is on there, and it's my number 2.
When I said Immolation, did I say Acts of God, or did I say The Age of No Light? Because I'm just looking at my list now, and for some insane reason, that's what I wrote down. But either way, people know what I'm referring to.
Yeah, we know, everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. So my number 2 is Ultha, All That Has Never Been True. Now here's the question. Last year, unwittingly, because we don't compare notes beforehand, unwittingly, our favorite album of the year was exactly the same thing. Will it be the same thing in for 2022?
I don't know, man. I don't know. We're about to find out, though, I guess.
What was your number 1?
My number 1 is Goat Horror Angels
Okay.
Come from the Arches of Heaven. And yeah, I've known these dudes forever. I've been a fan of them live. And this record, their newest record, is like their best album, in my opinion, because it's, though I love them live, their albums, I don't listen to them as much as I should probably. But this record was like incredibly listenable. You know what I mean? And yeah, Goat Horror has always been known as an incredible live band, and now they're a band that makes incredible records. Like this latest record by them is like, it's got all the elements that you want to hear. You know, I mean, you can hear the Celtic Frost elements, you can hear that kind of like New Orleans, that NOLA sound is there, in full force. Sammy's like, he's such a great player, and Ben is like one of the best singers, really, in extreme metal, and one of the best singers performance wise, and also one of the best frontman in the live setting. Like I challenge anyone to upstage that guy, and yeah, that's my number one, man. I still to this day, I've been like hard volume listening to that record.
Yeah, it's a superb album, and I totally agree with you. I think Ben Folgu's awesome dude. It's been awesome having Sammy on the podcast twice now. I've been a fan of Goat Horse since it came out, so I was especially happy that there was a bit of a throwback to that second record of theirs, because they do a lot of the kind of blackened thrash stuff, and I'm fine with that. But I like some of the gnarlier, darker shit. Some of that more kind of heavy Celtic Frost influenced stuff. There's a lot more of that on this record, so that to me immediately scores points. So good selection there. Unfortunately, for 2022's the class of 2022, we're not quite simpatico, because if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to come as no shock to you when you see my T-shirt. My favorite record of the year, the Antichrist Imperium, Volume 3, Satan in His Original Glory, came out on Apocalyptic Witchcraft Records. Again, I've had this album probably for well over a year before it came out. So it's a little like the Amenta record last year. With the Amenta, I'd had the album for a long time before it came out, and as I was kind of deciding what was going to be my favorite album, I kept going back to what am I almost reflexively prone to switching on when I'm not sure what I want to listen to, and Antichrist Imperium has been that record this year. It's every single man in the band's finest hour, in a stellar, series of discographies. Obviously, you've got David Gray, drummer for Akrakoka, drummer for Voices. I think he's turned in his best work. He's certainly I got this from the interview that I did with him as well. It's the happiest he has sounded, or the most kind of, you can sense the enjoyment he's getting from being behind the drum kit on this album, more so than I think I've heard on any other record he's done. Matt Wilcock and Sam Bean I've already spoken about. Again, their two finest hours. If it were just those three guys making brutal, uncompromising black and death metal, they would still turn out a great record. There's no doubt about that. But then they have this secret weapon, like this weapon X in the arsenal in the shape of Sam Loynes, and the clean vocals that he has added to this record. And particularly now that I have the context around how those vocals were added, that he literally just improvised melody, over having heard the riffs and stuff like that Matt sent him. The guy is a fucking genius. He is one of the most talented musicians I've ever come across in my entire life. I don't think he actually realizes himself how talented he is. But it makes for something that's so unbelievably unique, but really kind of captures every single thing that I've loved about all of the various men's musical endeavors over the years, especially Akrakoka, which is one of my favorite bands. But I actually personally think on this record they've outdone themselves, and they've taken it even a step further, which is why I was always so keen to promote it on the podcast, and hopefully people have picked it up on my recommendation. But yeah, there's absolutely no doubt. I think probably about halfway into the year I was like, unless something earth shattering is released this year, I can't see anything knocking this album off its perch. Kind of the same as the Amenta was the year before.
Well, that record was in my top 10 too, but then, like I said, man, as the course of the year, progressed, it's just so hard to, I was working on this list literally up until last night. So
Yeah, no, well, like I said, the method to get to these actually this final 30. I mean, it was fucking intense. I had like, a shortlist playlist. I was listening to every single thing back to back. Then I would like have a list and I'd go, okay, let's just try one song at random off of each one. Is it still where it needs to be? Then I'll like change stuff again. It's fucking nuts. But like I said, what an amazing year 2022 was. And it feels to me like 2023 is going to be even better. We're recording this on the 27th of January. On this day in the year of our Lord 2023, there's been 3 great albums released, and Oceans is awesome. Bizarre Cult is awesome. The Ashen Horde record is excellent. A week previously, you had Vothroch, which is also superb. So, you've already had January be pretty busy for good releases, and January is normally really quiet. And then I know, obviously, we've got Marduk coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if Mayhem does something. There's a lot of bands that are going to be putting out new music this year that I'm super excited about. So I've no doubt we're going to have another fucking awesome 2023. But hopefully, it's going to be a 2023 in which we get to meet each other in person finally, which is long overdue considering we've known each other for over 4 years now.
Yeah,
And,
it's definitely long overdue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like certainly the next episode we'll do together, we need to speak to Scondado, but it needs to be the 666 countdown of classic 90s death metal.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I've been thinking about that too, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff, and yeah, that would be really fun. That was a fun time. We got the 3 of us together for sure.
That was a blast, and people loved that episode as well. So I'm thinking 666 countdown of 90s death metal. Then we've got 2000s black metal, 2000s death metal, and so we'll go on. The only bone I have to pick with you is related to Necromaniacs and why Pearl was not higher up on your list. Because it was the best horror movie of 2022, and any other opinion is wrong.
Yeah, it is a great movie. I'm looking forward to the 3rd one, man. That's like, I feel like he saved horror in some ways. Like, not to say that there hasn't been great movies like in the horror genre, but they've been more independent. And I feel like Ty West is like more of like a mainstream guy, and mainstream horror has really become so just tepid and lame, and no one wants to offend anyone, no one wants to push any boundaries or anything like that. And for him to make a big film like that and have it come out in all these major theaters, I thought was great, So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he's supplanted Ari Aster as sort of the savior of modern horror, because I'd had high hopes for Ari when Hereditary came out. I mean, that to me is one of the best horror movies of the last 2 decades. Midsommar I thought was shite. I thought it has a fantastic opening, and then it's a letdown from there on out, right to the very end. I saw the trailer to Beau is Afraid. It looks like it could be interesting, but it also looks like it could be a load of pretentious crap.
I'm totally not on board with that, man. His newer one, but yeah, I agree with Midsommar. It was the most significant thing I didn't like about it was that it's folk, quote unquote, folk horror, right? Is like there's like certain elements of that style that were not present. Like he didn't go deep enough into some of the mythologies and things like that, which I would have appreciated, and I thought Midsommar was pretty bad, really. I mean, it couldn't decide. There's funny moments in there that were weird, and I don't know, like, and also it's just the Wicker Man, basically it's the same.
Well, the Wicker Man without the benefit of somebody as charismatic as Christopher Lee.
Oh yeah, man, he's the best, and like I said, if you compare those 2 films, like that really, I mean, that was like a genre defining film. And what Ari Aster did with Midsommar was just a very pale representation of that, really.
Yeah, it was like if you had in the early 2000s, you had these real like paint by numbers gangster movies, like mafia movies that came out. It kind of felt like that. It was that equivalent of horror, and they had. I mean, you had the makings of something cool. I've always liked horror movies that have like a stumbling upon some sort of satanic ritual. I mean, the movie The Ritual I thought was fucking cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That sort of thing I've always really liked, but I do feel like very few movies have ever gotten it 100% right, like the way that I would want to see it. Like even The Ritual, I mean, they should have kind of made it more of a, more of a satanic thing and less sort of monstrous and fantastical at the end. I don't really like the fantasy stuff is fine, but I don't really find it scary. That was the brilliant thing about Hereditary, that ending of, up in the treehouse, with the fucking cult and all the weird shit. It was genius. I was like, this is exactly how I've always wanted these movies to or the kind of territory I wanted them to go into. And he could have done the same thing with Midsommar. But as I said, instead it was just
like with Hereditary though. That was more of a folk horror film than Midsommar.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it was like taking the setting from Midsommar, however it's pronounced, is more in line with a typical folk horror. But the fact that there is this like ancient belief system that was in place in Hereditary is more in line with like the spirit of like those like older films, like Wicker Man and whatnot,
But either way, I will be listening diligently to Necromaniacs. As I said, one of my favorite podcasts, the only podcast which is like mandated listening. I always try and listen to almost all of the Horseman's shows, but like if things get crazy and hectic at work, I'm like I always make sure that Necromaniacs is the one I listen to. So I absolutely love the podcast.
Well, same thing with into the Necrosphere. And that's why, like, we were all mad at you for taking that time off because we needed that Tuesday action. So
well, back now. So I mean, hopefully this year there's going to be some more face-to-face stuff. I mean, if you do come to Europe, we'll definitely do a face-to-face episode then. It's different, totally. I've only done obviously the one, but it is definitely a different vibe when you feel the energy of the other person.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to do a face-to-face with Cheyenne. I'll definitely try and do a face-to-face with Ralph. And then again, who knows what else happens this year? Katie always seems to come up with some sort of surprise, like, oh, I've got this person that you can speak to. So there's always something cool that comes up, and I've got a few other good things in the pipeline. But yeah, man, excited about the next 12 months, and it has been a blast catching up with you as always. So hopefully we do it again very soon for our next installment of the 666 countdown series.
Oh yeah, man, and thanks for the opportunity to come back on the show. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. All right, hang fire for 10 seconds. I'm going to stop recording. I just want to say something to you afterwards. You have just listened to one of my favorite songs from 2022, off my number one pick for album of 2022, the song Vilest of Beasts. The band is the Antichrist Imperium, and the record occupying the top spot in my momentous countdown of the best releases of the last 12 months. Volume 3, Satan in His Original Glory, and that was released by Apocalyptic Witchcraft Records. Make sure that you are showing that band, as well as all of the other bands mentioned mentioned by myself and my guests over the course of the last 3 weeks. Plenty of love. And of course, thank you very, very much to Mike Hill for coming on, doing this countdown with me. It's become a bit of a tradition, and I hope it's one that we're going to be able to sustain. And I would also like to say to the Sams, Loins, and Bean, to Matt Wilcock and to David Gray, all four of you, if you're listening to this, have really pretty incredible back catalogs, and back catalogs that contain very, very few missteps. But I have to say, I know that none of you are planning to hang your instruments up at any point soon, but if you did, you would be doing so, in my view, at your absolute peak, and that is relevant, I think, for all four of you. So great work, and I hope that I'm going to have a couple of those guys on the show over the course of the next couple of months, as well as a couple of the other bands who I have featured on my lists as well. All right, my friends, right now, if you find Kamala Harris inspiring, it's time to get to stepping, because this is my weekly news rant. All right, we are going to head to Metal Storm in just a second, but before we go there are two new songs that dropped over the last couple of weeks, and I thought that I would save them for the news rant segment. One of them is by Funeral Winds, which we will start with. The track is called Stigmata Mali. The album is going to be dropped by Osmos Productions in the next couple of weeks. For Feb 24th it comes out. The album title is also Stigmata Mali. I really enjoyed the last Funeral Winds record, and I've enjoyed most of the Funeral Winds albums previous to that, so excited about what this is going to sound like. The album cover, I've got to say, is a little dubious. No offense to the man who runs Funeral Winds, but I'm not so sure that a serious person isn't necessarily going to make that the album cover. That being said, artists are known for their eccentricism, and I definitely think you need to take a lot of what you see in black metal with a pinch of salt anyway, I think. But either way, music from this band generally is serious as a fucking heart attack, so let's hear what Stigmata Mali sounds like. Pretty fast and furious, definitely my kind of black metal. Is it grabbing me as much as the songs off of Gruzel Lamenton, which was the previous record that he put out, that Hellchrist, as he's known, put out? No, it's not actually. It's and that might be because recently there's been bands releasing, bands like Darvaza, for example, releasing their new stuff, and they do this raw kind of unhinged style of black metal. Really, really well, which, as is the case across really most of the black metal spectrum, the bar gets raised every single time. I feel like that maybe applies here, but what I'm hearing has a lot of promise, and I definitely think this will be, it's certainly no great departure from, any of the last couple of Funeral Winds records, and it's also nice to see that Hellchrist is keeping himself very busy. Gruzel Lamenton came out in 2021, Essence came out in 2020, the record prior to that, so, since he's kind of decided to go his own route, he's clearly not being held back by anybody who is, not creatively contributing. I'd say I'm erring on the side of a thumbs up on this one, but let's give it another 20 to 30 seconds, and we'll decide. I like me that breakdown. And I was actually trying to have a quick scan on my phone to see what Stigmata Marley actually refers to, because I have no idea. But I didn't manage to find anything showing any sort of definition. But I did see that a couple of websites have already got reviews of this album up, and the reviews are very positive. Metal White gives it 4 out of 5 stars. So looking forward to that. But as I said though, and again I mean this, with love and sincerity in my heart. But that album cover is not it's not suitable for 2022. Or 2023, I should say. I'm not presuming that there should be nature shots or any garbage like that either. But it just feels a bit cringy. Anyway, that's just my opinion. I might be in the minority on this one, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. And this, by the way, is why I was thinking of doing the news rant, as a live stream. At least a couple of times. It's not going to be standard practice, but it'll be fun to get your take on things as I'm giving it in real time. All right, now we move on to another track that I've been keen on listening to, Tribe of Pazuzu. The song is called Blasphemous Prophecies. It's off the album of the same name. The record gets dropped by Vic Records on March the 6th. And of course, Blasphemous Prophecies features my friend and Into the Necrosphere guest, Nick Pazuzu. He was on the show way back. I think this must have been like episode 50-something, 60-something. A controversial online figure, but a man who speaks his mind, which I like, and a dude who, I would say I'm pretty strongly aligned with him on quite a lot of our thinking. And for those of you that don't know, it's not Tribe of Pazuzu, it features none other than Flo Monnier of Cryptopsy. I know that John McKinty of Incantation was also involved at some point with the band. I don't think that he is anymore. But I'm really, really glad that Nick is carrying on with this project, because I very much enjoyed the EPs that he put out previously. My expectations for this track is high. So let's hear it for ourselves right now. But this is a great example of what happens when you have consummate professionals executing a tried and true formula to an absolute turn. I mean, this is old school death metal, unashamedly so. I mean, I know that Nick is pretty hot on that as well. He's not a dude who's necessarily keen on too much experimentation in his music, but he doesn't need to have it in this, because again, it's done so well. You don't really need all that many bells and whistles here. It's got a great riff. I love Nick's vocals. You've got Flo Monnier absolutely fucking laying the smack down with the drums, as he always does. I mean, I don't think there is a single Flo Monnier performance in existence that is not, amongst the elite of the elite as far as drumming is concerned. And then I like the production as well. I like that really kind of bass, like thick bass heavy production that the song has got. And you hear the bass guitar and the bass lines very, very cleanly. So this is good stuff. Very, very good stuff, actually. Let's get back to it. That is sensational stuff, and it gets a thumbs up on their YouTube channel. And actually, I'll subscribe as well. So that's another subscriber added to theirs. Go check out their YouTube channel and make sure that you show this band some love and support. I personally think they should be an awful lot bigger than they are, and this song just proves it. So yeah, very good stuff there. All right, let's move on now to Metal Storm, and the first headline that is attracting my attention. I know that I'm going to fuck up the pronunciation of this band's name, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it as I read it anyway. Ulfod. Where Strange Lights Dance is the first single and opening track of the Ulfod's opening debut record of Existential Distortion, which has premiered online. Icelanders will put out the new outing on March 17th, 2023. Now, I don't feel as bad about fucking up the pronunciation of that name, because whoever wrote that press release clearly can't speak English. So you butcher my language, I'll butcher yours. I don't know this band. I do like me some black metal from Iceland, though. I am very much looking forward to Hellfro putting out a new release at some point in the not-too-distant future, and I'll definitely get Ragnar back on the show when that happens. And then my love of Mistyrming is probably well documented by this point. So anyway, let me shut my mouth, and let's give Where Strange Lights Dance a spin. Just something that I wanted to highlight here. When that song starts, it sounds very mundane, very ordinary, and then all of a sudden you got that howl that sort of is layered over the opening riff, and it just elevates the whole song. You know, it takes it from sounding like something that could just be black metal also ran to something that now, at 48 seconds in, I am genuinely interested in hearing the rest. So on that note, let's hit play once again and hear where they go from here. The verse we're listening to right now, I must confess, I'm not the biggest fan of that riff. It sounds a bit mundane, to be honest with you, especially in comparison to that howl sequence that we just highlighted earlier, and then actually the sort of mid-tempo gallop that occurs right after the verse. I also think is. It almost feels to me, and be interesting to get a fly on the wall peek as to how this was, or how the song was constructed. It almost feels to me like it's two riffs that two different guys brought to the table, and the band collectively decided that they fit together quite well. And I would surmise that the riffs that, or the players in question, there's maybe a slight difference in capability. At least songwriting capability from each of them. I don't know whether I'm being too harsh there. It's a good song. I'm enjoying what I'm hearing so far. But like I said, if I were really to nitpick, I'd say the verse is the bit that maybe lets the song down a little bit, and then it's immediately vindicated when that mid-tempo gallop comes in. But not bad. Not bad at all. Let's move on. Okay, next up we have got Striper, who have revealed their US touring plans. I know that many of you in the States will be front and center for tickets at that buffet table. But it says here, Autumn Hour drummer has died. Vocalist of the American progressive metal band Autumn Hour, Alan Tecchio, shared sad news about the passing of the band's drummer, David Leshinsky. I'm not familiar with Autumn Hour, but condolences to David's family and friends. There are an awful lot of people that are passing away, in my view, well before their time. And not to go down, any great rabbit hole about, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, but I do find it odd that the mortality rate, I think, in the all-cause mortality rate in the UK right now is something like 15% up from what it typically would be. And that is a bit of a concern. But anyways. Okay, let's get back to music. And the band Ashardon, or Ashardon, I think is the way I would pronounce that. It says here they are a black metal duo, and they are premiering a Christian Koss and Christian Kircher directed new official video for Altus Hers. The song is taken off their latest EP release, Turo Freminga. Turo Freminga sounds like a dish that you would order at an authentic Mexican restaurant. Bring me a burrito and a Turo Freminga, please. But enough bullshitting. Let's listen to some music. I'm going to pause there because this is a 12.5-minute song. I'm going to assume that they have self-recorded this track and that they did not have a producer telling them that, hey, maybe that intro is a little long in the tooth. Let's jump to the midway mark, minute number 6, and let's hope that things have progressed pretty significantly from where we've just stopped. I'm afraid Ashardon may live to fight another day, but today is not their their day to receive the much vaunted accolades of top notch on Into the Necrosphere. A band who has been on the receiving end of many top notches from me over the years, a Venomous Concept, have released another track of their forthcoming record, The Good Ship Lollipop. I am busy working at the moment on trying to get either Shane Embry or Kevin Sharp on the podcast. Either of them would be brilliant to have. Let's make no mistake about that. The song that they have released is a tune called Fractured. And as you will probably know by now, if you're a Venomous Concept fan, the new outing is due out on February the 24th. Love me some Venomous Concept, love their previous records. They haven't put out anything remotely bad in my view. I also liked the singles that I've heard so far, even though it is quite a departure stylistically from the stuff that they've done before. Like they've kind of put that grind that they used to emphasize previously more or less aside in favor of something that sounds a little bit like Poison Idea, which makes sense because Venomous Concept is a play on the band name Poison Idea. So maybe they're kind of going back to what the actual vision of the band was to begin with. Either way, let's hear what Fractured sounds like.
I've seen
At around that 20-second mark, if somebody had told me you're listening to a new Killing Joke single, I would have happily believed them. I understand that Shane Embury is a massive fan of Killing Joke, but it's I'm not going to call it a ripoff. It's clearly a tribute, and I like it. I almost feel like it's missing Jazz's vocals. Jazz Coleman, of course, of Killing Joke, for those of you fucking Philistines that don't know that band. But it's very, very different. I mean, even by the standards of the previous singles that have been released, that is very different. This also sounds like it could have been a Napalm Death song. So I'm kind of wondering here whether this is one that Shane wrote, maybe had what he thought was a great idea, pulled it together, and he was unsure of where it needed to land, and maybe this is how it ended up on a Venomous concept record. But I like that chorus very much. I think the interplay between the clean vocals and Kevin Sharp's, gorilla about to fuck you up rasp works really, really well. I was wondering, actually, as I was listening to that, I mean, surely Shane is prolific enough to be able to put a hand out to or reach out to Jazz Coleman and get him on, something that he does, whether it's a full-blown project or just as a guest on a Napalm Death record or on a Venomous concept record. I mean, can you imagine what his voice would sound like, in maybe like a dual vocal battle-a-thon with Barney Greenway of Napalm Death? I mean, that would be fucking incredible. But good song. Like I said, it's very, very different. I have a feeling it may split opinion just a tad. Speaking of splitting opinions, that's probably a nice segue to talk about episode 3 of season 1 of The Last of Us, the TV show, obviously on HBO. Now, I'm going to probably release or give away a bit of a spoiler here. So if you haven't watched episode 3 yet, then I suggest you skip the next 5 minutes or so. I'll give you a quick synopsis of it. Episode 3, we meet up with Bill. I believe he's Bill. I think it's either Bill or Bob. We're going to assume his name is Bill, and if I fuck it up, then tough, because I'm not re-recording this shit. But so we meet up with Bill, a gentleman who's presented to us as a survivalist, probably a guy that listens to Alex Jones, and in doing so has been preparing for the end of days for quite some time. He has an arsenal of automatic weaponry in his basement. He has various ways of keeping himself alive, fed and happy post-apocalypse, and that's kind of the man that the episode centers around. He is, of course, a character from the game as well. His role in the game was maybe a little more interconnected, shall we say, and I'll explain what I mean in just a second. But anyway, in this episode, he meets up with a guy named Frank, who's another survivor that happens to stumble upon his compound by mistake. He and Frank quickly fall in love and begin a romantic relationship that stretches across roughly 2 decades until, unfortunately, Frank decides to euthanize himself. And spoiler alert, so again, skip if you don't want to hear this. Spoiler alert, Bill decides to take his own life alongside Frank so that they are not separated in kind of a tragic Romeo and Juliet or Romeo and Romeo style scenario. Now, I personally think now. Let's talk about the reaction to this first and foremost from John Q. Public or from the media. There have been gushing articles written about this episode by all of the usual outlets. Calling it the greatest television ever recorded, and literally the most wonderful thing in the history of HBO, etc. All of that's of course false, because the greatest episode of television ever recorded is the Pine Barrens episode on season 3 of The Sopranos, and most likely in our lifetimes nothing will ever beat that. But back to the to episode 3 of The Last of Us. So there is a chorus line of people saying it's wonderful. There's also very predictably a chorus line of boos saying that it's the worst thing ever. We're watching a show about the apocalypse. We don't want to see any gay stuff or any woke stuff on our TV shows, etc., etc. Side note: if you were put off by the sight of man love in The Last of Us on episode 3, I suggest you find yourself something else to watch well before season 2. And those of you that have played the game will know what I mean. But my view kind of sits somewhere in the middle. Firstly, I thought that it was a incredibly well shot, well directed, very intensely, beautifully acted episode. It was very heartfelt. It was very touching. And both myself and Paige, were actually, quite moved after having seen it. Now, that being said, I've played the game multiple times, and even though I'm definitely not averse to the TV show straying away from the game's narrative and the game's content, the big difference here between the game and the show is that in the game, you meet up with Bill after Frank has passed away, and Bill plays a small but meaningful role in helping Ellie and Joel, our two main characters, get on the road and on the way to presumably where they're going to meet up with the Fireflies, who will be able to, where Joel is supposed to deliver her to. It makes for a really cool set piece because in the game there's this really funny comedic interplay between Bill and between Ellie. There's also a fucking insane scene where they get set upon by a bunch of mutated, folks that look like the average citizen, the average Democrat voter in Portland, by which of course I mean the zombies from Last of Us. So my thoughts are, I really like the episode, but for the life of me, I can't understand why they chose to kill off Bill before the scene, before the set pieces that I've just mentioned that you have in the game. Because I kind of feel like in this instance, you really could have had your cake and eat it too. And I think in some ways, if you wanted to get a message across about love, having no boundaries, and, The Last of Us being at its core, a love letter to humanity, in some ways, I think you're almost cheapening the message a little bit, because to the folks that are potentially reflexively inclined not to like anything that approaches something remotely woke, and by the way, I don't really think that this was a woke episode, but I can see that many people will think so. But folks who have a reflexive reaction against that, they're just going to see this as being a shoehorned in gay romance that Hollywood felt that they needed to inflict on us, and that's not the case at all. I think it's unfair to judge it as such, but I think you're positioning it to look that way, because really, if the entire backstory of Frank and Bill was not in the show whatsoever, or there was no episode built around this, would it take away at all from the story? The answer is absolutely no. So that's my thoughts. I think it was a good episode, really, really good. It's not the best episode of the show so far. Here's what I'm thinking is also going to be super interesting. So I think HBO saw a big bump up in ratings for this episode. Question will be, what will the ratings be on episode 4? And of course, as I said, my personal view, based on what I know, is bound to happen in season 2, unless they really take some serious creative liberty with the source material. I still think that season 2 will be the death knell of this show. And that's not saying that it's right or wrong for it to be that. It's just saying that's just my takeaway from people's reaction generally to certain things happening in shows. And it's not just woke stuff. It's actually more to do with a particular character and what happens to them. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Last of Us. As I said, I'm still really enjoying it. But it's as I said, it just felt to me like a missed opportunity, a really missed opportunity. Okay, folks, let's carry on. Xandria, I have released a new record. I'm not going to bother listening to it, but because again, as soon as I see cravats and Victorian clothing and stuff like that, I immediately won't listen to it. But I will say the front woman for Xandria is rather fetching. We're moving through the list pretty rapidly because there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of news that's of interest. Abaddon Incarnate are a band I've actually done a react to on this segment in the past, and if memory served me correctly, I actually wasn't all that impressed. But let's give them another try because they are on Transcending Obscurity. Big fan of the label, and very keen to give their bands a bit more of a rub on this podcast, the ones that are deserving, of course. So it says, Irish extreme metalers Abaddon Incarnate are unveiling an official video for Veritas, a track taken off their latest record, The Wretched Sermon. The clip was directed by the band's guitarist, Bull Whelan. Let's give it a quick spin. That's pretty damn good. It reminds me a bit of Nazoom, actually, and it is a whole lot better than the previous song I heard off of this album. So, I mean, this is good enough that I might revisit that record. I might even revise my opinion on the band. But I like this. It's very, very good. The song is pretty short, sharp, and to the point. It's only a minute and 18 seconds with 35 seconds in. So, if you want to listen to the whole thing, go check it out on YouTube. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for you right now, but it's 35 pretty good seconds. And I was, of course, referring to, in that pretty good comment, to none other than Curb Your Enthusiasm. When you want to talk about great TV, that show is fucking genius. I have watched every single season of that show at least 4 or 5 times, and I never tire of it. It is absolutely fucking masterful. Deaf Heaven confirm extensive touring over North America. Highly overrated bullshit fake black metal band Deaf Heaven have announced extensive touring plan over North America where they will perform as special guests on a headlining tour of the New York band Coheed and Cambria. Another utterly overrated piece of trash. I'm sure that the folks over at Metal Hammer will be clutching themselves with excitement, though. Next, we've got Gra who are introducing a new guitarist named Fredrik Henborg. Swedish black metal entity Gra or Grå are pleased to welcome Fredrik Hernborg of Turfing as their full-time new guitarist. A couple of weeks ago, Grå put out their newest record, Lesion. Do we have music? No, but we've got a picture of Fredrik looking like quite a badass, wearing what looks like some leather armor. Speaking of leather armor, I've been getting into Elden Ring, finally. I know it's been out for about a year. And it's pretty fucking great. It takes a while to get your head around, all of the nuances of the game. It's got a very steep learning curve, but once you're into it, it is absolutely superb. Another thing, before I get to the next news headline, let me just find the box here to show you guys if you're watching this on YouTube. So, I have been having the biggest issues for at least 2-3 years with ground loops, or with a ground loop coming from my media PC going into my amplifier. And for those of you that don't know what a ground loop sounds like, it basically causes like a hum in your speakers. Fucking drove me absolutely insane. I tried many things to solve the problem, to no avail. And I finally found the solution. I'm not sponsored in any way by these guys. I'm just sharing it with all of you in case any of you have the same issue. I bought myself one of these, so holding it up there to the camera. It's an iFi GND Defender, I would assume ground defender. Cost me £99, and not only solved the problem, but frankly, I think the sound is actually better because the noise floor is lower. So if you have ground loop issues, on this occasion, I plugged this straight into the power supply of my PC, and then obviously my plug just goes into that, and it sorted the problem out completely. So there you go, some free hi-fi and or home entertainment advice for you. But moving on. Ghost of Atlantis revealed a cover for Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb. Ghost of Atlantis, also into the Necrosphere alumni, who have been doing very well for themselves. And I can also see the downloads on that episode continue to kind of tick over. So, that was a calculated gamble that I took getting those guys on the show. But I mean, they were two very nice guys. So, it says here, British Gothic metalers, Ghosts of Atlantis, present their rendition of the Pink Floyd song "Comfortably Numb," featuring a guest performance by Anna Chiara. The five-piece is also planning a new record release this summer. Guitarist, vocalist Colin Parks comments, "Pink Floyd has always been with me as a child growing up, and now it is the same with my son. We wanted to pay a tribute to the band in the best way we could, so we hope you enjoy it." It's a pretty ambitious thing taking on a song like this, because it's one of those tracks that's so absolutely iconic that you can very easily fuck it up, I think. So, but these guys definitely don't strike me as men who would shy away from a challenge. So let's see how they did. Great job. Great job. I think including Anna was a inspired idea, because I think she's a great foil for Phil's vocals. I think that they didn't fuck around with a formula too much. I mean, the worst thing they could have done is to, include some sort of stupid black metal scream or death metal growl. Not that those are stupid, but you know what I mean. It's like it would be ill-fitting for a song like this. Include some sort of black metal scream into the song. They didn't try to make it heavy. They just did the song the way that it's meant to be done. and added a little twist to it, by way principally of Anna's presence. But I think it works really well. Is it better than the definitive version of the song, which is the live version that they do with Van Morrison, and also the version that featured on the Departed soundtrack, which is the movie that I always think about when I hear the song? No, but I think they'd probably be the ones who concede to that as well. So, but like I said, man, it's the kind of song that it takes a lot of guts to do this, because again, it's a track that I think is so easy to fuck up and just make sound bad. But it's a testament, I think, to these guys' capability that they pull it off really, really well. So good job. Okay, one more, and then let's move on to Blabbermouth. I have been told that I need to revisit this band with a urgency by quite a few people now. So Aara have unveiled details of the new studio album. Of course, I think they brought an album out either last year or the year before, and I wasn't convinced by it. But anyway, it says, crowning their tripart interpretation of 19th century Gothic novel Melmoth the Wanderer by Charles Robert Maturin, Aara present the concluding part of the Triad trilogy to be released on March the 31st. Triad 3, Nyx, is a succinctly elegant display of power and class, a paring down, tightening up, and condensation of the forceful yet nimble black metal style the band are renowned for. The outing was recorded, mixed, and mastered by Chower Studios Born. The cover artwork was painted by the esteemed Michael Hunt and Johnny Warren. It's going to be out on Deborah Morty Productions. Love me some Deborah Morty Productions. As I said, I was not the biggest fan of what I heard from this band previously, which is why I've not really paid much attention to them since, but I have been told they are a band I need to revisit. So let's find out whether the folks that did so are going to be proven right or will be forced to hang their heads in embarrassment. Let's just before we get into that verse, because it does actually sound like the song gets a little bit better there. But that opening riff can only be, or that opening sequence can only be met with one response. That sounds like all of those shitty atmospheric black metal bands from the late 90s that, frankly, were the downfall of the genre for a period of time. Reminds me of bands like Obtained Enslavement. I just don't like it. There's no danger there. There's no sense of menace. It does zero for me. Zero. So far, I'm not convinced, friends. But we're at the 1 minute mark, and like I said, it does actually sound like it gets a little bit better. So let's hear what happens next. And I still don't like those vocals. I mean, it literally sounds to me like a fucking cat has been caught in the back tire of my car. The melody on that verse is pretty good, and I actually quite like the drums. There's a nice sort of rolling groove there. I don't know whether they've got a real drummer or whether that's a machine, but either way, it sounds good. It works. But the song itself stinks. I'm not a fan. And even as I sit listening to it and I go, well, the verse sounds okay. When you have to convince yourself of the merits of a song to listen to it, then why bother? I've just in the last 3 weeks gone through 30 records that frankly I could have on rotation a million times over before listening to that. So I am sorry, folks, but not my vibe. I also see, by the way, that Enslaved have revealed a new single. But I'm not going to bother listening to it because the last single that I had on with this band got the fucking episode blocked on YouTube. That was episode 258 when I had Matt Prizzo and Kelly T on. Why, I don't know. 30 seconds of me listening to the song, saying, "Wow, that's great," and then moving on to the next thing. I mean, I can understand if you're going to, I can understand if I'm going to have the whole entire song on a monetized channel, and if effectively take away money from the band, but that's not what's happening here, folks. This is this is me kind of promoting the band and giving the band some coverage. And it's not like I've got 3 people downloading the podcast every month. I've got a reasonably sized audience, far more reasonable than a great many podcasts that I've seen these guys get interviewed on. So, that sort of thing really fucks me off. I think it was Orchard Music that was responsible for the block, and it caused me a whole bunch of hassle trying to get it on. I think Legionnaire Richard Schubrook was the one that reminded me that 258 was taken down. So not going to be able to listen to anything by Enslaved on the podcast again as a result, but to Orchard Music, go fuck yourself. And you would also, if you guys had seen the episode, I think it was two weeks ago, I was listening to that Metallica acoustic track, and yet another example of fucking idiotic content monitoring on YouTube. Once again, 60 seconds worth of song. I'm saying this is great. I wish Metallica would do more of it. And Viacom CBS get the video blocked. So if you watch this on YouTube, you would have seen my fuck Viacom CBS banner splashed across the screen on that particular sequence. But it's just so unnecessary and such a fucking pain in the ass. I always have sympathy, and I'm always on the side of the bands and the artists, but I have very little sympathy for the music industry because it is a septic tank of incompetence. And the vast majority of people I've come across who work in the music industry are only working in the music industry because they knew somebody, they've been around for ages. For the most part, they are completely and utterly abysmal. Which is also why, actually, just as I'm on this beat, it's also why I call out people like Katie Irizarry, because I think when you operate in such a swirl of incompetence, it's very important that you can tell people that do a very good job that they are appreciated and great. Now, Mike and I spoke about these Pantera cancellations, so as we head over to the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music, it is fortuitous that Zakk Wylde comments on some of the Pantera concert cancellations. It says here, in a new interview with Guitar World, Zakk Wylde was asked if he had a reaction to the Pantera concert cancellations in Germany and Austria this spring, following an outcry over singer Philip Anselmo's previous racist remarks. He said, "There's nothing I can do about that, you know what I mean? In terms of my role, it's always a case of being ready for whatever, as in seeing if the fellas want to add any more songs or anything like that while we're out rolling together on this tour. If I get a call from Phil or Rex and they want to change up the set or do whatever, I'm usually just in the back lounge working on more songs." The longtime Ozzy Osbourne guitarist also talked about his approach to playing the guitar leads originally performed by Pantera's founding Axeman, the late Dimebag Darrell Abbott. He said, "It's inevitable. It will end up sounding like me. If Dime was playing with Oz and doing my stuff, it would sound like Dime playing the solo to No More Tears or Mama, I'm Coming Home. It would be Dime's vibrato, Dime's tone. It would sound like him playing my stuff. Even if he did it note for note, it would sound like him because that's his sound. You know what I mean?" He's right about that, without a doubt. It doesn't really seem like he says all that much about the cancellations. Because then, of course, later on in the article, Blabbermouth do what they usually do with anything like this, which is to provide us with several paragraphs worth of hard-hitting investigative journalism. I mean, I'm not going to bother reading through it, but I think I stand by what I said on in my conversation with Mike. I think first and foremost, Phil has form for being incredibly socially awkward, saying things on stage and doing things on stage, and you need only go back to the late 90s when he was hitting the H pretty heavy to see examples of that. But I think he says things that he has great regret over lately, or later on. Sorry, not lately. Later on. Now, is he a full bore racist? I don't personally think so. As a matter of fact, no good or vulgar display of power is a pretty strong statement against racism. And I would also say, even if he was a racist, given his profile, he would truly have to be the stupidest man in the history of society, or in the history of the world, to come out as a full-blown, full-fat white supremacist on stage, because that would, of course, in the modern day and age, in the culture, destroy all of his social capital immediately. So, did he say stuff that he shouldn't have said? Yes. Was it absolutely stupid to make a joke like that? Definitely. Has he apologized? Also, yes. Has there been any incident since then that intimates that, he's a racist? Also, yes. And from my perspective, the only guy that's really talking about how he's a bully backstage couldn't really point to any specific racist things that had happened under him. No one has really been able to say, no one has come out, and they've toured with a lot of bands. No one has come out and said, that Phil was, talking to me about, reading the Mein Kampf, and that it's, it's a really good, insightful book, brother. None of that shit. So, yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a bit overblown. And as I said to Mike, I think that the standards are applied in a very haphazard way. And personally, would I be more offended by, Pantera being on stage, even if he didn't apologize and he just said, well, it was a joke and that's the end of it? Or would I be more, I think actually, let me rephrase it. Should the average civilian be more offended by Phil Anselmo or by Sam Smith? I don't know whether you guys have seen this recent fucking travesty where, he's now, over the last couple of years, tried to remold himself as the non-binary version of Lizzo. Packed on 150 pounds, he's simulating all sorts of weird fucking Caligula activity on his new his new music video. But I mean, aside from the fact that the song sucks, the video is in poor taste and absolutely atrocious. I wouldn't want my kids seeing that, but Meadow can certainly watch a Pantera video any day of the week. Not maybe the home videos, but she can watch the music video for Walk, which she used to do frequently as a little kid. But if I were them, here's what I would do. I would reach out to maybe a couple of venues in Germany that would host them, and I would book a show on exactly the same night as Rock am Ring, and thus steal away whoever would have attended the Rock am Ring show. The other thing that I would do if I were them is also to take out some smaller bands. I saw, and I think I've spoken about it as well, that they're taking out Lamb of God. Great, Lamb of God is a good live band, even though their last album was a steaming pile of fucking poo. But man, this is an opportunity for a guy who's always professed to be one with the underground, Philip H. Anselmo. This is an opportunity for him to take out bands like Spirit World and Enforced, maybe a couple of black and death metal bands even. But that's something that I have far more of a gripe with than his social awkwardness, quite frankly. And I have that gripe with all of the bigger names, in that they never ever seem to give a lot of the younger bands the rub and the exposure that they deserve. I mean, even taking out an older band like Testament would have been, that would have been a nice touch. Imagine that lineup: Testament, Lamb of God, Pantera. But then you see the Testament live show and you go, I understand why a lot of these older bands don't want to take them out. They don't want none of that action. They don't want none of that Chuck Billy on stage throwing it down and making them look like trash. Anyway. Suffocation announces April-May 2023 the Warmth Within the Dark European tour. I like that name, the Warmth Within the Dark. They should do an album called that. Potentially they are doing an album called that. In an April 2022 interview with blabbermouth.net, it reads here, Suffocation guitarist Terence Hobbs stated about the band's first non-Frank Mullen, or stated how the band's first non-Frank Mullen Suffocation album was coming together. I'll be honest, we really like Ricky Myers, who is singing for us. He's 100% into it, 110 if you want to give that little extra bit of clap. The pre-production we're doing, he sounds super awesome, super aggressive. Of course we miss Frank. We would love to have Frank. We never wanted to tell the public that Frank wanted to retire. Him pushing all the time with his vocals, family, kids, travel, jobs, wife, and so forth, the things that go on in the real world. Frank said, I'm going to take the back seat. I'll do little things here and there, maybe some backups on somebody's record. I'm not really looking to write records, go on tour, and support all that stuff. I respect what Frank did. Totally understand why he did it. There comes a time where, you have to make a decision between, living in vans and playing shitty little clubs for next to no money, or actually ensuring that you are going to be able to retire with a reasonable degree of comfort. And he made that decision, and I respect him for it. Not heard Ricky Myers. I think I've seen a couple of live videos. He does sound good. But I had an absolute blast with Terrence Hobbs on the podcast, and hopefully he can come back on the show at some point. But yeah, looking forward to hearing what they do next. There have been, bands with iconic vocalists in death metal, as we all know, who've been able to very successfully make that transition to having a new vocalist, and it's not just Cannibal Corpse. Broken Hope to me with Damien is fucking unbeatable. I mean, live they are completely and utterly crushing. Scott Ian says it was amazing watching Charlie Benante perform with Pantera. Scott Ian, of course, was one of those guys that came out and sobbed and wailed about Phil as well after that Dime Bash incident. I'm surprised that he has not said anything about it since, now that it's back in the news. Next up, we've got Exodus's Tom Hunting, why Dave Lombardo is a double badass as a drummer. In a new interview with radioactive Mike Z, host of the 96.7 KCAL FM program Wired in the Empire, Exodus's Tom Hunting was asked how he first got into drumming. He responded, I originally played the guitar a little bit. I just dabbled. I was left-handed. I am left-handed. So I played left-handed guitar, and I did that for a couple of years in junior high, and then I just wanted to switch to drums. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of people don't know this, but Dave Lombardo is actually left-handed. His prominent hand is left, which makes him double badass, because when he goes into a drum roll, one hand's got to climb over the other one. It's crazy. But through that, he invented his own sound. There's a lot of goofy foot left-handers out there too, like Will Carroll of Death Angel. I call him Goofy Foot because he's a lefty in the top of his body, doing his rolls and stuff, but he's prominent foot and he's right for his kick drums. Nothing of any great insight there, but he is correct that Dave Lombardo, at least as a drummer, is an absolute badass. Ozzy Osbourne seen in public for the first time since announcing a retirement from touring. I saw a lot of comments about this online. I don't really have feelings about it one way or the other. I've not been a fan of Ozzy's solo material. Him as a man, I have no strong feelings on him either way either. I thought the Osbournes was a fucking terrible show, and for the most part, I've never been a big fan of his kids or his wife. But, I was reflecting on why people get emotional about, or not emotional, but, why they get sad about guys like this announcing their retirement. And I do think it has as much to do with the fact that it reminds us that that we're getting older, and that our days are numbered as well. Probably more so than anything else. I honestly think that's why people get miserable about celebrities passing away too. Celebrities that they liked. It reminds you that the journey is finite. But I think the way to deal with that, at least the way I choose to deal with it, is that should be a reminder to you to enjoy every single day as much as you possibly can. Extract as much from it as you possibly can. I had a really great piece of feedback sent to me for episode 258, and I'm going to see if I can find it so that I can read it to you guys. It says here, so this is UNT5473, cool conversation. We or I need more of this podcast than those fucking CEOs, motivational speakers who interview bullshit breakers. The new Metallica singles fan. I thought it was really nice that he said, that he found it motivational. And, I hope you guys, whenever I give any advice or share anything from my own experience, I certainly hope I never sound like I'm trying to be Tony Robbins or anything like that. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't like motivational quotes seen anywhere around me. I don't fall for any of that garbage. And I'm certainly not trying to be some fucking self-help guru, but I do think it's, as much as it's great that men talk about their mental health more openly in 2023, and certainly for the last couple of years prior, I see an awful lot of scenarios where people will post stuff online talking about, feeling a certain way. And I see a lot of folks showing empathy, but not necessarily showing or giving any advice, or at the very least, dropping a note saying, call me, or I've sent you a message, let's talk, or anything like that. Now, that may be happening in the background, you don't know, but the point of it is, I think we live in a culture of empathy, but not in a culture of solutions. And I think it's fine to, when it comes to women, my experience has been many women, when they're not having the best day, all they want you to do is listen, and they want you to shut the fuck up and not proffer any advice. So if I do proffer advice to somebody, to Paige as an example, I will, I'll see the earth for it beforehand. But when it comes to men, we're a little more solution orientated. And so, generally speaking, when you're not having the best day, or when something's gone wrong in your life, you are looking for advice. And my thinking always is, when I share something that happened to me, I've lived a full and interesting life. I'm 42 years old now, turning 43 in a couple of months. I've made a great many mistakes. I've been through some great times, and I've been through some very dark times. And if I share something, my thinking always is, maybe there's somebody out there listening to it that's going through exactly the same thing, and even if it just gives him a spark of an idea, that will bring a great warmth to my heart, certainly. And hopefully it helps him. So that's my I just wanted to comment on that. I've been thinking about that since I saw that comment, and as I said, I really appreciated that as well. But two bits of advice that I'll give every single man. If I had a son and I could impart two pieces of wisdom to him, the first piece of wisdom would be, as I've said on this podcast before, focus only on being. Your priority in life should be to reach or to become the idealized version that you've defined of yourself in your own mind. But the advice number two, if I hear the words house husband coming out of your mouth, start running, because your dad's going to fuck you up. No offense to house husbands, but I've got to say, and this is going to be controversial, and I'm not saying this because I believe, that women should stay in the kitchen and men go out and do the work. Not at all. I work in a job where I have, number one, given a great many incredibly talented women a lot of opportunities to advance their career. And I love working with women. I love working with motivated women. I think they're incredibly capable, and I think the dynamic in the workplace with women, is far better than if you just have a kind of pure male-dominated environment. But that being said, I have seen in the last 3 months marriages that have lasted a good 15, 20 years previously disintegrate because the husband became a house husband. I think a woman will abide, my experience, and ladies, you can tell me if I'm full of shit here, but in my experience, a woman will abide by you as a man, not being as successful as she is, but what she will not abide for too long a period of time is you sitting at home, even when you claim to be a house husband. I've just seen that happen twice now. A woman goes out, she's the breadwinner, she becomes super successful in her career. Next thing you know, dude's out in his ass. I just think it's, as I said, maybe it's not advice that's necessarily relevant to everybody, but it will certainly be advice I give to my son. You will never be a fucking house husband. Get out there and work and earn your keep. And as I said, become the badass you want to be. On that note, I'm going to wrap up the news rant for this week. All right, folks, that does it for this week. If you've stuck around until the very end, you have my deepest appreciation. I will be back next week, guest to be confirmed, but I've got a couple of straight-up badasses in the pipeline. And I have to, of course, say thank you once again to Mike Hill for joining me for this episode of the show. Also, massive congratulations to all of the bands mentioned across my top 30, all of the bands mentioned in the top 10s of my guests over the course of this epic 3-part series. We'll do the same thing again next year. But I wanted to play out with another of my inclusions, and who else but Ultha. the band that was responsible for my number 2 release of 2022. That record was All That Has Never Been True. It's out on Vendetta Records. I will definitely be catching up with Ralph Schmidt when he's here for Reaper Fest in July, but maybe we'll get him on the show before then as well, if he's available to talk. Always a good time catching up with him. And this album, if you've not listened to it yet, I could not more strongly recommend that you do. It is black metal of the most atmospheric variety, but it packs with it an emotional weight that, frankly, I don't really think I've heard in black metal, with maybe a very, very small number of exceptions. So sit back and enjoy. The song is called Dispel, and as I always say, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever it is that you are, I hope you stay safe, I hope you stay healthy, and I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week.